All right, what's up, guys? This is the PokerCraft podcast of Live at the Bike. This is your host, D22 Social and Chiang. And introduce yourselves, Harbz and Landon.
So I'm Harbz. My real name is Justin. I am 21. I've been playing poker for about 6 years now, so started a little bit young. I got into it. I've always had a sort of competitive background. I played Yu-Gi-Oh when I was younger and played that somewhat competitively, and transitioned a little bit into the esports world with Call of Duty. I know Landon has some experience there, and of course Wayne, StarCraft champion over here.
OG, super OG.
Exactly.
But you guys
But
played Call of Duty together? Did you guys cross paths?
yeah, we did actually. In Call of Duty Ghosts, I believe. We were both in high school, and that's pretty much what we were doing, like 8, 10, 12 hours a day playing Call of Duty, trying to break into the esports scene, I think, just fueling our competitive fire, our drive, and we kind of brought that over into the poker world. So I started playing poker around 15, 16. I just discovered it online, and I was actually breaking TOS a little bit, playing on my parents' Bovada account back in the day, and just started to grind it up slowly from the micros there. And kind of similar to Landon, except he took it a lot farther with online. I started playing live around 18 because I'm in Rhode Island, so that's allowed here. And I play at Twin River Casino, if you guys know where that is. And it was a lot softer than online. So I kind of thought I could make a lot more money doing that. And here I am now.
Right, Landon?
Here we are. What's up, everyone? I'm Landon. I'm 21, and I got into poker. I knew how to play poker basically my entire life, but I started taking it seriously after I left Florida State, and I was there for a couple years. So I probably played poker for about 17 months effective professionally since I left in January of 2019. But yeah, like Justin was saying, and like Wayne, I also was a big Magic guy when I was younger. It was allowed though. When I was 13, I was playing in some comic book stores, and played a bunch of Magic. And I guess that's where I kind of started getting more into like the competitive game sphere. I used to play chess when I was younger, and I was very very good at chess. I was second in the country from pre-K to kindergarten to third graders when I was in pre-K,
Not
and
bad.
that's one of my very I peaked young. So
It ain't over. It still ain't over. Don't worry,
yeah,
guys.
we,
You,
we
you
still
guys
have
have
the
a
we
long
still have the
journey.
fire.
Yeah.
And so since then, I guess, and since kind of playing games my entire life, poker is just kind of what felt naturally to me. And when I was at Florida State, I had some friends of mine I would play basketball with every day, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to play in a home game, just like a $20 tournament, winner takes all kind of format?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" I ended up doing well and scooping that for a couple bucks, which felt pretty good. And I guess ever since then, we've ran hot to get to this point, and started playing at the local casino up in Tallahassee, because you have to be 18 there as well in Florida. But since then, I started playing micros and started at 4NL, and I effectively got to this point now where I'm shot taking 1K now online, and I've been playing 5-5, 5-10, 10-10 games when I can in the South Florida area. But I mean, poker's just been great, and I've met a lot of really good people from this. And
Oh, you just
just,
wait. You're gonna meet some not so good people.
I don't know about that lifestyle yet. It's kind of scary to me. The outside world's scary.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, you guys are in infancy. First of all, shout out to your Twitch stream, and also we checked out your upswing graphs, so you're doing pretty
oh
well.
yeah, we're doing good.
Um, yeah, and
Doing
we're gonna
good.
talk about like the differences because I always wonder what's gonna be like for you guys coming up because it's much harder for you guys. Um, I definitely don't agree with Negranu that like it was harder back then. Like it's definitely harder now. We'll get into that, but what was interesting, Landon, is that you said you were staked and now you're on your own. So how did
Yeah.
that come about?
So when I first started at Florida State, I was actually a super broke college kid, had some degen sports betting tendencies,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up not having an effective bankroll to play 20-0. And when I first started getting into poker, I realized that I probably was going to get a lot better at this faster if I had someone that was better than me, kind of helping me out.
Yeah.
And somehow I ran hot in that aspect as well. And talked to my coach then, one of my best friends now. Um, not going to name drop. Just
Okay.
anonymous. He's anonymous. He's in the ether at this point. And he basically staked and coached me from 4NL up to 20NL, and then up to effectively 50. And then
Mhm.
since then, I kind of broke off from in April of 2019 to kind of go out on my own and play some live 1-2 on my own. Oh yeah, he staked me for 1-2 and live poker as well. And then I effectively tried to take a shot on my own. And then it went well, but when I'm paying the amount of money I was paying for rent while playing micros, I was never really getting anywhere. Like I would
Yeah.
make all the money I could, pay off rent, and effectively break even for like those 3 months. And I was like, there has to be a better way of doing this than trying to continually grind up from playing micros and live 1-2 to paying my bills and stuff I had to get paid. So I ended up joining a coaching stable from 50 to effectively 500 from August 2019 to about February of 2020. And then from there, I learned a bunch of stuff, met a bunch of really good people, and still talk to them as well. And then after that, I joined Poker Detox for about 2.5 months from from about March 1st to roughly the middle of this month. And then since then, I've kind of just been on my own and have enough money now to effectively take my shot. And just kind of think about it. If things do go bad and I do end up running pretty poorly, I still have the connections from there that are more
Right.
than willing to kind of like take me back under their wing for a little bit and then sort of take a shot until it sticks. And it's been great. And I didn't realize the amount of mental strain that could go into playing on your own roll versus playing on stake.
Yeah,
And
it's different.
I kind of feel it a little bit, especially when I shot took 1K NL yesterday on my own. I was kind of like, oh, like this is a little bit different. Like I used to think it would be a little bit different, but like the blood starts pumping a little bit differently. And I kind of like the feeling, but then again, I'm not entirely used to it yet. And I don't necessarily want to, the baby bird doesn't want to fly back to the nest that soon. But
We'll talk about some pitfalls, which I'm sure you guys have read about and talked to your peers about. But Justin, you want to talk about your background for poker?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, like I said, I kind of started when I was younger, playing on my parents' account, breaking TOS a little bit. And I just deposited like $50, and I got like actually really fortunate to turn $50 to $1,000, which like hasn't happened since like to most people at least back in the days of 03 when the moneymaker boom was happening. So like I felt like I was like on top of the world, you know, whole Dunning-Kruger effect was setting in. I was like, oh, this poker thing is easy. I'm just gonna crush everyone. So I started playing 200 NL zone on Bovada with $1,000 in my account. Busted that in like a day, I think. So I was like, oh, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. So then I was like, okay, maybe I should try to start learning about this game, see if there's a little bit more to it. Because I'd always heard that poker was like actually a beatable game, like a skill game. It's not like a casino game that they always have an edge, because everyone is always thinking about like the house always wins and everything. But it's like for poker, obviously they take rake, but you can actually play versus other peers, so you can actually win. So I just started watching as much online content as I could. I remember, even though it's probably not the best for strategy, I loved watching high stakes poker. It's just like, obviously everyone who grew up watching that or has watched that is just like, wow, what an amazing show. Tom Dwan was my hero.
So good. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like watching those huge amounts of money change hands. And it's just like, this is the same game I'm playing. It was super motivating. So I was just reading like all the articles online I could. I think I read a bunch of Jonathan Little stuff, honestly. Big shout out to him. He's a great guy.
Shout out,
just learning poker. So anyway, I did that. I deposited more money in Bovada and just played lower stakes. I'd read about bankroll management, of course, at this point, and I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't just play like with 1/5 of my roll on a single buy-in, etc. So I did that, and it was just like a slow workup because I was still in high school at that point, and I was also playing Call of Duty around the same time, so I wasn't trying to take it super seriously at that point. But as I approached 17, I was like, okay, well, I was starting to make a little bit more money doing it. And I was like, well, I want to make more money at this point. I want to take it more seriously because I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I wasn't really that interested in going to college. I was taking economics at the time, and I was doing a study in the class actually about whether it was worth it. And I concluded that for some people it really is, and for some people it really isn't. And I didn't think that was the way I wanted to go. So I decided that after high school, I was going to take a gap year and try to pursue poker. And it's really lucky that I'm in Rhode Island because it allowed me to also play live. And that was really what changed everything for me, I think, because the live games are just infinitely softer than the online games, as I'm sure everyone knows. It's pretty ridiculous. You see people opening to like 15 and 1-2 games and stuff. It's just really crazy how much softer the live games were. So I was like, okay, let me try this. insanely hot. Like I don't think I had a losing session my first like 8 sessions. Well, okay, now I've got like a decent amount of money to like try to do this. And I did that for pretty much my whole gap year. And I got to the point where I was like, well, I can do this. Like, I don't want to go to college. Like, I want to try to start becoming a professional at this. I was like aspiring to what my heroes in high stakes poker were doing. And my parents were not thrilled about it, specifically my mom. She wanted me to go to college. And I was like, well, I don't really want to do that. She was like, you just took a gap year, like just try it out. So I went for 1 semester and I wasn't really feeling it. I did okay, but my heart wasn't really in it. So I dropped out and started playing poker full time. I got a car at that point, which was really good because I could actually go to the casino myself when my parents were at work. And at that point, I also started discovering daily fantasy sports, which we'll get into later, because a lot of people in poker were getting into that. So that was pretty interesting. But yeah, I played 1-2 for a decent amount of time, but eventually moved up to 2-5. And 2-5 was where I really found what I was doing. It was like people who were playing 2-5 weren't really that much better than 1-2, except they were looser. So you could actually make like more money, and the rake wasn't as as brutal as it is at low stakes. Yeah, exactly. And so I played 2-5 and was running really well and playing really well. I think I have a more intuitive grasp of the game than my theoretical was, especially at that point. And I've really built that up as I've gotten older, I guess we'll say, but I'm only 21, like you've mentioned. But it was really good. It was really fun. And I started dabbling in the 5-10 streets. And that's basically what I was doing until coronavirus started, and then moved back online. But there we go. That's my story.
So let's talk about the different trajectories, because obviously you guys are, early 20s, and you had to deal with similar issues that I did deal with at that age, dealing with esports and poker. And it's not that we don't appreciate our parents for warning us about pitfalls of gaming, pitfalls of poker, but when we start developing these skill sets into a career or one of our careers, ideally, I want to be a good influence and be like, don't put all your eggs in one basket, in poker, because as I have many peers, Joey, Doug, Paul, Randy. We have a lot of peers that didn't make it. We're the survivors after these X years, and we've all been through a lot. So between the parents' trajectory and what your actual skill sets are, your parents want you to do college, which, as we know, is economically kind of a bad investment. But the thing is, the value. I joke about the value. It's you do it for your future in-laws, so they don't think you're an idiot. But honestly, there is a value, the social value. You just do it just because. Me and Kitty, Quo, Maria, we just did it because we're Asian, and if we don't do it, it's really bad. But I understand for just everybody, it's just you do it for a defense. It's not worth that much, but socially, you don't want to go to a social gathering, have to explain every single time why you dropped out of college. A lot of guys Dylan Weissman, Adam Swan, Bryce Yaki, Zach Freeman, Sean Snyder, we all finished. They all went to Santa Barbara. Maria Ho, Steve Sung, Joseph Chung, we all finished, kind of to say that it's just so we don't have to deal with that conversation. And it's not a bad quality to finish. That being said, I did a very similar thing to you guys, and I didn't go directly to college after high school, but I had a really good reason, which was I was competing in StarCraft. I was traveling to New York, South Korea. That being said, I was lucky to even be able to survive at that time, because if you're aspiring to be an esports pro back then, I had $14,000 in winnings. I had a Gamers.com job that paid $28,800 a year, plus it was a great opportunity, and I was I was able to be in contact with Squaresoft. That time Final Fantasy VIII came out, and Pokemon, the Game Boy version, was pretty big. So I got a lot of experiences that were just oh, and I also went to E3. So that was so cool at that age to do stuff, which is what you guys are doing now. You're talking with cool people. Shout out to the Joe and Your podcast, the best podcast in the world. Even better than Joe Rogan. In all seriousness, you guys are at the age where you got to figure out what you're going to do. And it's not, and you can kind of tell your parents, it's not that you're ruling out college. It's you got to practice your chops. And at this juncture in 2020, you got to find out what you're good at. and what you can contribute to the world. You're not like degenerating your lives away. Like if you need, character references, be like, look, we know you're young. We know you have a long way to go. You guys know that too and acknowledge it. Let's see if you can make the 5 years, make the 10 years, make the 15 years. And you're not ruling out that if things go bad, that, you'll try to be responsible. But as you guys said, you have a gaming background. Like the economics behind, like you guys got to tell me the economics behind professional gaming now. Because like you can't look at SKT1 Faker or all these guys with the sponsorships and stuff. That's like not reality. Like there's a lot of people who try to get those slots, and I was lucky to have a piece back then, but that's not retirement money. It's great that you could Google me, but like it counts for something, but it's not a retirement career. So as you guys figured out for poker and Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon, that's terrible. Like if you have to travel to these locations and you succumb to the variance, at least like real-time games, there's like a lot less variance. So people like back then, like David Williams, Bob Ma, or whatever, they had like, they have an EFRO, they have like a Magic background, but they went to poker too. Which, it's like I said, I also asked the audience what you guys go through because, like I said, it's a lot tougher now. There are a lot more tools, and No Limit Hold'em is the gateway to get into poker because it's televised and stuff. And as I say on broadcast, if you want to play for a living, you should probably branch out to other games like Live No Limit to be like, Garrett, Andy, Brian Kim, Art Papazian. That is a really hard route, and there are some things that you guys haven't gone through yet, which I know you guys have heard about, which is like private games. You get locked out. At some point, you get to a certain skill level, and you're not welcome, which I'm sure you guys have heard about. So you guys want to tell me about the economics of if you guys have went through the gaming direction, like the esports direction, why you chose poker over that?
Yeah, I'll start. So for me, when I first started playing Magic and things like that, I was a lot younger and kind of not really. I was still in high school for both of these things. For Magic, maybe I was even in middle school. Like I remember running around the comic store when I was like 12, thinking like, oh, like this game's great. I want to be good at Magic. And then it got to a point where I realized like either societally, I didn't want my friends to know I was playing Magic because it's not necessarily like looked at or taken the right way. So I was like, this is fun and I'll still do this. And I still play Magic all the time online and fire some drafts and things of that nature. But I just realized that it was probably going to be very, very difficult. And I'm not even entirely sure like that's how much I wanted to do Magic. And then with COD, it was a little bit different because I was a little bit older. And I thought to myself, okay, maybe I can get good enough at this thing to be able to be successful at it. But then I just realized like how much work had to be put in, how much time had to be put in. And even so, like there's just a natural talent in a game like that just far exceeds other things. And when I got to poker, I realized all of these, and from listening to Joey's podcast was one of the biggest things for me back then and still is now, is that all the guys that were on the podcast basically said the same thing. I wasn't very great playing poker at the start, but I grinded and I worked hard and I really wanted to do it and I really wanted to succeed. And now here I am. So I took that as a message of, okay, if you just grind every single day and you like put your everything into it, it's potentially possible to be successful. But then again, I was also lucky enough to be the age I was and be able to have time off and not have other things to necessarily worry about. Because it's a lot different if I look back when if I was 35 and said, oh, I want to play poker now, because maybe I have a family and kids and other responsibilities to where I'm not able to effectively take all of the risk on myself and still have the time to go back to school in a sense. Because I went from college straight from high school, and then I literally went to Florida State the same summer I graduated. So I had maybe a month off and then boom, straight to college. Yeah. And then I just realized in college, I was like, I didn't see any profession necessarily mapping out. And I just was enjoying playing poker from the micros just so much. And I was like, I'm willing to give everything I have to this game. And I'm willing to make the connections and talk to the people that's going to help me in the ways that help me get better at poker. And then also I'll be able to do social things by meeting some cool people along the way. And what I realized, at least from the social aspect, is when I first started coming up, and even like until a very recent past, until maybe a couple weeks ago, I write a blog, and it's in one of my blog posts, where all the friendships I had were mutually beneficial to an extent, but I was definitely siphoning most of the value away. Of maybe it was like 80-20 me getting value, like me caring about them as a friend. And I kind of saw people as utility to me versus actually being my friends. And I realized how toxic that was, and I don't want to do that anymore. And I want to have like relationships with people I meet in poker. But then again, I also want to be friends with those same people, because poker is a business, sure, but the business that I'm working around is other people as well. And I'm not the kind of person that wants to chop someone off that was a friend of mine that was useful to me then, but not useful to me now. And that's kind of a little bit of a different concept.
Yeah.
But the idea of just economically, like, I just realized that I probably wasn't going to make it in these other fields unless I put in a lot more time and potentially energy and money. Just because for Magic, like, you still have to have money to buy cards and things like that. And I was 13. And then for COD, you have to buy some controllers and monitors and this, that, and the other. And then even then, like, I didn't have the money back then, and it probably wouldn't have mapped out, at least not even close to the trajectory poker has. And because people see the whole like superstars of Twitch and things of that nature for these games, but for every one of them, there's thousands that fail. And it's the same thing for poker. But for poker, I was very, very trusting in myself and my ability to be like, okay, I'm smart enough to do this. I just have to give it everything I have. And it's got me up to this point, and I'm really thankful to be able to be here.
So we'll go to Justin in a sec, but one of the things that you're on the right track is if you want to develop like a actual connection or contribute, is you're creating content now. You're streaming on Twitch and you're doing your blog, which Harbz said he's helping you out on.
Yeah, he's helping me out with Twitch a lot.
So Harbz, you want to chime in on?
Yeah, absolutely. So Landon's always been a little bit more invested in tracking and talking with the community about himself personally, whereas I've just like not been interested in that. And I think that's great because like obviously people like him help grow the game like a lot more than people like me who kind of just like sit back and like play. And I think it's like a lot of like an like situation where shout out to Joe Ingram again, where it's like he kind of introduced us a little bit to the content side of poker, where it's just like not just playing the game to maximize EV, but it's also playing the game to help grow the game, help other people learn. And like Landon and I both really want to make people who are in our orbit succeed, because otherwise what are we doing? We're just being selfish. Like he kind of said, like he felt like he was siphoning value a little bit where he wasn't intentionally doing it. It was just a thing where he was so motivated to move up in stakes and get good that a lot of his relationships kind of turned that way. And we actually met through Twitter, Landon and I, and we were having a conversation about poker. And it's actually kind of a funny story because a lot of the Twitter interactions that people have, it's just willing to change their mind or their point of view. And there's just a lot of confirmation bias happening. And I remember it specifically because in the argument, and Landon was like, oh yeah, I didn't consider that. You're right. And I was like, whoa, like this doesn't happen very often. Who is this kid? I looked at his profile. I was like, Joe Ingram 1 follows him. I was like, okay. So like Joey recognized too, like this kid, he might have something in him. I followed him. We started talking. I think we talked like every day for like 8 months after that. It was pretty crazy. But yeah, let's go back to talking about esports where, so I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And it was along similar lines of Landon where it's not like a popular thing to do, right? It's not like you want to advertise that to people who you're going to school with, right? Especially when you're younger, like kids are gonna be mean, kids will be bullying you. So I never really told anyone. I would just play at a local card shop, and it was like really fun. Like I really enjoy strategy games and stuff, but I never really considered it as a potential like future path because the upside wasn't really there, right? It's just like, as you said, Wayne, there's a lot of competition and variance to it where it's like the prizes aren't even really worth it there. So it kind of, it's just a bad situation, sadly. I mean, I really love the game, and I think it's a great game too. But so I moved on and started playing Call of Duty a lot. And I think my story is a little different than Landon's here, where it's like, I really thought I could make it and have a path forward in esports. And like, this was just during the time, probably the very start of when esports were starting to become big, like, especially Call of Duty. Call of Duty was like at the forefront, and it's not really anymore, where it's like, it's not as like League of Legends is obviously like the biggest game right now, and games like that, where it's like PC games are where it's at. But Call of Duty, like, it seemed like it was going to get bigger and bigger because they had like Call of Duty championships and a lot more sponsors hopping in. So I was like, okay, I want to try to give this a shot. The one thing that really held me back, I think, was trying to break into like the top tier community of it, where it was like you're only as good as the people you're playing with because it's kind of a team game, right?
Yeah.
So it's like I was trying to play these tournaments, and the way to get notoriety is to win them, but it was kind of in like a losing position because I wasn't playing with the right people. And then when I would try to play with the right people, right, by interacting on Twitter or something like that, it's just a very ego-driven thing, because, especially because a lot of the best players are younger, right? So it's like they're trying to win too, and they're like, well, I don't know this person. Why would I give them a chance? So it was just not a way to have a good path forward where I could make it in a spot where it was just going to be like easy, or not easy, but like a clear path to succeed. I would have to get like very lucky just to break into one of those communities, and then also play well enough with a lot of competition, right? Because video games, there's just so many people playing where it's like very hard to distinguish yourself. It's not something like poker where you can have a results graph like Landon shoot into the moon, and you can be like, wow, okay, this person's clearly doing things right. It's like more heuristic based, where it's like, wow, they just made this like really sick play, but you can't like quantify it unless you see it. And there's just so many individual games being played, etc. So I kind of moved past that, even though I really did like love it. I have a big love of competition. So poker really was a natural fit for that, because it's like there's the monetary aspect of it as well. It's not like you have to be on a team with someone else. You don't have to have sponsors behind you. You can just, your skill allows you to make the money to move up and succeed. It's a real meritocracy, right?
Yeah. So that's a topic that there are several topics that I want to follow up on, you guys, is games, they don't care about your ethnicity, they don't care if you're male, female. It's like it starts off as as much of a meritocracy as possible, with just a set of rules and a goal, in which, in the real world there can be a massive amount of variance. So it's interesting because I thought that the social aspect of people being gamers was better in this era, but maybe it's different. Also, me being Asian, like, honestly, like, it's just accepted that even Asian women are just like, oh, just playing video games. It's like literally very little. I don't even think there's a negative. It's just something, and if you do well, then it's obviously positive. But it's probably different for white and black people socially. You want to comment on it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because there is the whole cultural shift happening around esports even now, where it's just getting more popular. So it's like in the early days, especially when I was playing and Len was playing, it was starting to become more popular, but it wasn't like a really mainstream thing. Like they weren't showing Counter-Strike on TV or anything. They weren't, it wasn't these huge mega prize pools. Like they were big for the bigger games, but it wasn't nearly as big as it has grown to be, because it's like the biggest growing industry right now, I think. So it was just, there was definitely a negative stereotype attached to playing too much video games, especially by people who are in the older generation, right? Because they think it's like you're just wasting your time. It's like not productive. Like you should be doing something that's related to, I don't know, either your future in schooling or et cetera. Like they don't see the worth behind it. They just think you're wasting time. They just think you should play a little bit for enjoyment, but not, they don't think there's anything that's going to come out of it, right? And like that really changed with the whole shift in the esports industry, where it's just growing so big. It's like some people haven't accepted it yet, but it's going to be as big as real sports, right? It's just there's so many people that play these things. It's hyper competitive. There's so much skill that's involved. There's teams, there's sponsors behind it and everything. So I think it's just a cultural thing, where like the older generation might not understand it. And I don't think it's really based on race as much. I think maybe it might be more accepted for Asian people. Maybe it's something that you guys are all not I don't want to say all, but like, what I'm saying, right, Wayne?
Yeah, it's just it's more normal, I guess, part of the upbringing that video, like, I don't know what it, like, say your peers at school, like, it's just even my generation or people younger than me, if I say, oh, I play StarCraft, I do well, it's like clearly a positive. I don't impose myself on like other groups and be like, oh my gosh, recognize me. It's just like a quality. But among certain groups, it's like, oh, it's definitely a positive.
Yeah, I think a big thing that potentially might be part of it is, at the start at least, when we're younger and playing games and doing things of that nature, it didn't seem to effectively map. But now that there's kids that are 12, 13, 14 crushing in Fortnite or whatever game's going to be hot next, and Valorant's probably going to be one of those games, where if they're allowed to play and can still make money and have a career out of that through streaming or through things like that, there seems to be a positive ROI on doing that, potentially, where before it looked like a net negative of you're just wasting your time, there's no future here. Now that there's futures coming up, and they're even like everyone who is in the US knows Ninja, right? So like if anyone says, oh, like your kid's getting into video games, how good is he? He's like, oh, he's really good. He watches Ninja all the time. And the parents are like, oh, Ninja's making heaps. He's very successful and he's being a positive role model in the industry. And now kids see that there is potentially a chance, whether it happens or not, that they could make something from themselves from the gaming community. But it gets a little bit dangerous, right? Because not everybody's going to be the next Ninja. And then there are kids that are 12, 13, 14 whose brains aren't necessarily developed enough to think that they're going to be the next one because they're the best out of their friend group. And then maybe they spend all their time playing video games and it potentially doesn't lead or amount to what they wanted to. But then they slack off in schoolwork or other fundamental ways of necessarily making something of themselves to where it's potentially going to be a problem in the future. But right now, like parents, I've heard kids get like Fortnite coaching, like paid by their parents, just because like they want their kid to be one of the next super crushers of Fortnite. Like it's a thing. So it's like it's new territory, because before games didn't necessarily map out like they used to, at least in America, to where I'm not entirely sure how many. I mean, at least when I was growing up, I didn't know anything about StarCraft, and at least in the US, I would never talk to anyone that was playing StarCraft. It was more just like video games like Madden or sports-based games. But now these games that are getting all this sort of attention are diffusing into the US. And it's a good thing to an extent, but it has its consequences as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll let you, I'll just touch on this briefly. So like I've obviously given this a lot of thought, being a pioneer and like dealing with this in decades. One of the differences between esports and sports, like I don't even care about the argument of whether esports is a sport. It's the fact that the rules for normal sports don't change. Like baseball, basketball, and football or tennis, say, they don't change. But the games in esports, whatever's hot, or just say the difference between StarCraft 1 or StarCraft 2, like me, like playing the beta in StarCraft 2, I'm like, this is not the same game. But the intellectual property of the name StarCraft will carry over. So whether it's Call of Duty, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, whatever, even though the game changes, the best case scenario is the genre carries over. And that's one of the limitations of esports compared to, say, normal sports. Also, the skills you develop, like me specializing in StarCraft, has correlation to StarCraft 2, but one, I'm too old. Two, it's not the same game. So it's harder to transfer over, which I don't know if you guys are paying attention. Like a lot of the StarCraft Brood War players didn't necessarily transfer over to StarCraft 2. Or just like, they're old. It could be in many things. Like they're older, it's a different game. There's like, are you going to commit your life to do that? So like you guys said, there's the trajectory is more there, but does it scale? And what you guys were saying about like lessons for Fortnite and stuff, that goes for every industry. That goes for like, can you be Ninja? Can you be, Leonardo DiCaprio or Matt Damon? Like there's all these, or can you be Steve Jobs or Elon Musk? Like there's always these icons where you're like, oh, I want to be like that. 99.99% of the people are not going to be that, but you could be part of the industry. Like you spend time in games, like you can apply to game industries. You need those hours to understand the genre in which, like, the current iteration or the next iteration, like if you don't spend time, you're not going to get the job.
Yeah, I think like that's a pretty big point about the whole video game kind of idea moving over, is because like if football, like there's no football 2, right? Like football stays the same. So it's like in these video games, like the specialty of the game and the skill set is consistently changing, which is why there's always new and improved superstars. And there's some people that are naturally talented enough to kind of shift games. Because I know that Ninja was playing PUBG and now he's playing Fortnite and now he's potentially moving to something else. I'm not entirely sure. But either way, like it's not like they're devoting their lives to this by the time they were 5 to try to be in the NFL.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to succeed in this video game, and then maybe that's hot for however long of a time it is, and then they might have to transition into something else where they have the baseline, but there's an entirely different mechanical skill set that goes along with being successful in that game itself. And that's it's a massive reason why it's probably not as popular.
Yeah, I agree with both of you there. So what you said about the games changing, Wayne, I think that's like a really big thing, especially like the big difference between sports. And I know like a lot of Call of Duty players, they used to, a new Call of Duty would come out every year. And it's like, well, there's similar aspects, but it's like the game's going to be different. There's going to be newer players who are coming up, and reaction time is, as you get older, is not going to be as good. So it's like, I think the one thing that makes it a little more consistent, like you were kind of talking about, Landon, is streaming, right? So like what Ninja did, becoming so big, and obviously like not everyone can do that. No one's really at this point even gotten as big as him. But what you can do is kind of build a following, right? Build your audience. And so what you're doing is maybe you start off being very high skill level of the game, and then you can build your audience around that. And then if you don't want to play that anymore, or you want to play something new, or you just want to talk about the game or something else, you have your audience. So it's like you guys can stay together and you can transition that to streaming and doing things on YouTube. So I think that's like a big thing about the gaming industry that allows success, right? Just like the streaming aspect, you don't have to be just like the very best player, but if you're going to be in the competitive aspect, then sure, you want to be very good, but also just entertaining, right? Like it's an entertainment industry, streaming is, right? It just involves games because it's something that's there, but it's also the personality, right? Like kind of look at what Lex Veldhouse has done with poker. It's just like
shout out,
so impressive, especially considering he's playing poker while doing this, right? Like his opponents are watching him play and he has to interact with the chat and stay so high energy the whole time for these long streams. It's just like super impressive. And like when you see someone putting the dedication and the grind like that, it's just like, wow, okay. Like if you're not putting in as much work as possible, like you're not going to be as big as him. Like how could you?
Yeah, like there's definitely a different, and I guess that's the kind of thing with me now doing a little bit of streaming and other things in poker that's not necessarily just playing poker for itself. It's all different skill sets. Being a streamer and being a poker player are two different skill sets, but you can play poker while streaming. And the thing is, like, that takes time in itself. Of you can't spread yourself too thin, because if you want to be the best no limit player there is and also be the best streamer there is, you're spending 100% of your time in two different places, and you can't be full octane high energy for every single thing you do, because naturally you're going to spend more time doing other things by default. And that's kind of a potential problem, which is why I actually left college in the first place, is because I said I can't do college now. I need to focus on poker and then see how that goes. If it doesn't work, maybe I'll go back. Or at least it's a lot harder to become a successful in a short amount of time. There's some people that can do it and that they can juggle both and be able to do that. But I just figured logically, I'm going to give myself the best chance to succeed in poker by taking some time off and seeing what happens. And it's the same thing with streaming. And I thought I could do streaming and poker at the same time, but I can't. And I'm going to try to focus more on my own poker playing and stuff. Still do some streaming when I find it fun, of course, because I love doing streaming and interacting with the chat. But that'll be on my own time versus trying to be a professional streamer or coach or other things that's in the poker industry that's not necessarily poker itself.
Well, it's okay to try. I mean, I definitely want to encourage you guys, and I'm like so old, and I'm trying to like, reach into these like newer, forums of content creation. But one of the things is like, how we were talking about, say, Call of Duty 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't even know what number they're at, but just like in all these comments about, oh, poker's dying, it's like, yeah, poker's never going to be, the moneymaker boom. There's two booms coming up. I don't want to talk about them too much, but poker and chess are always going to be here. Like no matter how dead it is, like throughout, as long as humans exist, and with the current world events, who the hell knows what's going to go on? Like poker and chess will still be here. So if you want to allocate part of your career into that sector, that's part of stability, I guess. And whereas like, the video game industry, it's like constantly evolving because, tech is constantly evolving. I don't think it's a bad idea to have, a portion of your advantage play portfolio in poker or, content in poker. So if you guys ever want, if like whatever you guys are doing is not working out, there's still the stable thing, which Dylan Weissman, I had a podcast with him. He had a podcast with Joe Ingram.
Dr. GTO.
Dr. GTO. He's done like several startups, I think 3, and I don't want to misquote him. But dude, like if you think the graveyards for poker pros is big, startups is way worse. So he came back to poker because there was less variance, as did I. Like I, had a hiatus. Like, I've been trying to do things back and forth. I'm still trying to do things, but it's ironic that this game of variance is actually more stable. And I don't know if you guys know, it's like I'm a prop in Los Angeles, in which I'm going to ask you guys like how the poker scene is, where you guys are at. But just like there's a strong infrastructure in like Los Angeles / California where it allows a poker career to survive so much better than it used to, even though the games are much tougher, or at least the infrastructure is strong. So I wanted to ask you guys about like what's the poker scene like? Justin, you're in the East Coast.
Yeah. So I'm basically on the Rhode Island, Massachusetts border. So it's pretty good actually because I was going to Twin River when I was 18 because I was 18 plus. But now that I'm 21, I can play at Encore, which most people probably heard. Encore Boston Harbor opened, and the games were really good there. There was like a lot of stuff running early on, and like higher stakes that I was probably not gonna dabble in, but I want to learn mixed games for that reason because there was like some high stakes mixed game action running, which is like obviously pretty good if you can get good at mixed games. So yeah, the action's really good over here on the East Coast. It's not that far to drive, like 40 minutes each way. So that's kind of annoying, but no, it's not bad at all. And there's like actual room to move up where it's like if I was probably in Central or somewhere, I probably wouldn't have access to like higher stakes live games. So it's like probably not as good as out in LA, which I definitely was planning on coming out there. And Landon and I were actually planning on going to the World Series of Poker this year to play some events, some cash, but obviously that didn't end up working out. But yeah, no, the games are good over here for sure. Going to be playing a lot of Encore.
So for me and my sort of, I guess, habitat, I'm in the South Florida area, and the games here are great. However, there's a cap for sure, because there are semi-private games in casinos and things of that nature, and private games, of course, to where 2-5 and 1-2, 1-3, 2-5, they're always going to be there. But then when you start moving up a little bit higher, the games start to become a little bit more privatized and pretty more selective. And that's just the nature of the game is people either make those connections to start private games and the games just don't run. So I'm not necessarily at a point yet where I'm effectively trying to play live poker full time, and I probably won't ever be in that position. But for now, and my needs of playing poker, and when I have the time to go play some 2-5 when I'm not playing online, that's a very reasonable thing, and I get as much action as I want. But as soon as maybe I start playing higher online and start playing 2K now and get to that point, I only leave my house basically to go play live because of the social aspect, and I get to talk to some people and I know some friends there and
Very
things
important.
of that nature.
Yeah.
And the games are great as well, but anything like that's high stakes action or anything that's higher than 5-10, I still have to be pulling some teeth to be able to play in those games, unless there's just a magical open game running on the weekend.
Right.
And that's okay. That's okay for now because I'm not looking to play super high stakes live games, or not even just super high stakes, just 5, 10, 10, 25 plus. Those games just don't run, and if they do, they're privatized. And that takes a whole nother aspect of, rather than just being a poker player, you also have to be someone that the recreationals like to have in the game and be someone that wants to get invited back. And that's an entirely different skill set as well. And I'm not. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
No, the younger generation is often criticized for the headphones and iPads. Do you guys want to comment on what you guys do?
I mean, personally, I don't wear headphones when I play live. I'll maybe have an earbud in and it's pretty. I don't have AirPods, but I have like a headphone, and I keep one in my ear. Maybe if I don't know anyone in the game, but if I do know someone in the game and I have some friends and stuff of that nature, I'm probably the most talkative person at the table. And that's just because if I wanted to stay home and not speak, I could have just played online myself. And I enjoy going to live poker rooms and talking to people and getting to meet some people. And I've made a lot of really good friends that I talk to every single day now that are either my age or a little bit older that kind of talk to me about their lives and either in poker or outside of poker, having a family while doing poker, while not doing poker, all these sort of things that I've been really fortunate to just kind of meet these people, and I wouldn't meet them if I didn't get outside the house. And I know like there are some regs in the stereotype of the headphones and the hoodies and stuff like that. I wear a sweatshirt, but I never wear hoodies, and it's just cold in the casino. It's just cold. And I get the stereotype and I see it, and that's just most of the regs, and like the regs that will never get to play in a game that they want to get to play, like they want to play in, if they ever get to that point, is because they're not good for the game, or at least not good for the environment of the game. Because the environment of the game isn't about trying to siphon all the money as fast as you can. It's supposed to be a social experience, and you're also playing for money as well. Like the best thing at a poker table to talk about is not poker, by far. Like
Yeah,
talking strategically. Like
completely. I agree completely with that. And I wanted to add on, I think it's just like one of the biggest mistakes you can make if you're trying to be a professional, especially live, where if you're not talking to people, or if you have headphones on, or if you're just playing it like it's online, where it's like you don't want to, like, there's so much information in the first place, right? So just from your bottom line perspective, like you can get live reads. Like I know everyone online likes to joke about it, but it's like they're a thing. Like
Yeah.
you can find out where someone's mindset's at. Like, so just from a purely EV perspective, it's smart too. But also from a societal perspective, it's like no one wants to be a jerk. Like, I mean, maybe some people do, but I want to be nice to everyone at the table. Like, they're giving me action to play with them. Like, obviously, everyone wants to win. Well, most people want to win. Some people just go to blast off, but those people,
match cards. We call it match cards.
Yeah,
people just want to match cards. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, if you're not interacting when you're playing live and trying to have a good time, like make the people around you have a good time, there's just no real point to be playing. Like, if you're just going there to try to just make money and sit there quietly, I think it's a pretty big mistake.
I mean, it's I guess effectively fine if you're doing it for like a selfish perspective of like I'm going to the poker room, I'm going to make money. But then again, like opportunities outside of that are just not going to exist because you're never going to get the ability to. Like I would never meet the people or have the connections I have now if I never talked to anyone at a poker table. Maybe at some point I'll talk to someone just because of sheer just being there all the time. Maybe. But if I'm just like super focused, hyper focused in the game, only caring about like the EV of that specific instance, the human aspect of the game is just lost. And that's, at least for myself personally, that's why I go play live. So I would just be shooting myself in the foot if I went there with some hoodies and this, that, and the other, because there is a lot to be learned in the live environment from an EV perspective, as well as just as a human. Like you sit around with 8 other people, might as well try to have as much fun as you can because you're only playing one hand, like 20, 30 hands an hour. And most of the time you're folding. And most of the time, if you're not talking to you, like there's just a lot of downtime. So spending that time talking to someone, getting to know someone is a decent idea, but then there's ways to go about it where you don't start like soft playing, because that's happened a couple times where like either I play a hand with someone and like I talk to them, we're effectively like friends, and it's like, oh, like I don't want to, like if you're playing against like a pretty fun player and like, oh, like I don't want to give you action, like I know you have a good hand, this, that, and the other, like that could hurt your bottom line as well. So it's a really, really fine line of trying to find out how to effectively be nice and sociable at the table, as well as still get the action from at the same time. Because most of the people that are playing for fun anyways will still give you the action, sure. But sometimes there are some instances where people are just like, oh, like I don't want to play big pots against you anymore because I think you're my friend and I don't want to take money from my friend. So it's just a really, really fine line.
Yeah, I talked about this with Dylan Weissman, Dr. GTO, and Mac Verstappen. Just in general, just like, especially if you start having a professional relationship with, said people, which you guys ideally will when you get older, like poker's a networking tool on top of, a money-making mechanism. And one of the things about like, a lot of your generation or even a little bit older get berated for the headphones and iPads. And I'm just like, nobody likes being talked down to. Like we can, as experienced people, can communicate better why it's like that, and it's not going to happen overnight. Maybe you put the iPhone, or these guys put the iPad away one day but still have the earphones, or they put the earphone away and still have the iPad, and then eventually you kind of wean off the training wheel of just kind of being more, just viewing poker more selfishly, because part of poker's acceptance does require people at the table, all of us included, everyone included, to be more social, so it becomes a more accepted part of, you know, society. And like I just like it's tough. Like while I agree with a lot of people, like the headphones and iPad's bad, like don't like berate people. Just try to, and it's not an overnight process. Just slowly be like, okay, it's not good. This is why, and you could like try to slowly wean off if you're interested in trying to be part of the community or helping the world. But the problem is, young guys, this goes for every industry. Their profession is tied to their self worth. Um, and the second things are going bad in the poker world, which happens, you go on downswings in which they're different for other industries and other professions. But then people start getting nasty. You know, it's just like, because it is human beings, we want to have self-worth. And then all of a sudden, if you are tied to your downswing, or maybe you're not good enough, or you know things are going bad in life, that's when you kind of have to be like, okay, what am I here for? Should I put all of my self-worth into this? In which Doug and Joey mentioned content creation, and this is what I found too, gives you an extra avenue and outlet, and same with DJF and a bunch of other people, excuse me, the vloggers. It gives you another avenue to give yourself value and self-worth when things are going bad. So I'm glad that your guys' generation is really catching on, and even though you don't need to go full force like Twitch or vlogging, at least you get started, because getting started is one of the biggest humps to overcome.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you brought up about people at table, like maybe not thinking ahead enough, where it's like, okay, they're just worried about what's happening in the moment, where it's like, if you lose a pot, you're like, oh my gosh, like now I'm down this much and I don't want to talk to these people. I just want to get even. I just want to get back to where I was. I want to get up money. It's like, they're so hyper focused on the results, where it's like poker's a long-term game, right? And like, we all say it and we all try to like distance ourselves from being results oriented thinkers, but it's like, it's super hard. We're human beings, right? And so it's
Right.
like, I think that's what a lot of people who are like, especially younger, have trouble with, right? Because it's like, we have trouble disassociating ourselves from our results, because if you're younger and you're playing at a decent level, like high, like mid to high stakes, maybe like probably high stakes, mid stakes, you are really, really, really invested in succeeding, right? And if you're not succeeding, it's gonna affect you unless you're very good about compartmentalizing your emotions away from that. So it's, that might be a reason why that some of us try to avoid interaction at the table, where we're just trying to detach ourselves from the social aspect, and then maybe we can try to detach ourselves from results. But I don't think it's the healthiest way to go about it, because it's just a kind of like putting a band-aid over it, right? You need to start with your mindset, and then once you get that to a higher level, it allows you to play even better and also improve the experience around you and just like create a better environment.
So that's a difference. I think also our parents' generation, or your parents are probably younger than mine, but like they kind of were in a pre-internet era, and at that juncture, you only really, like, people back then would be like, "What's your job?" Like you only really had one skill set and one profession. And whereas, like, you know, my generation starting, and you guys even more so, you got to develop as many skill sets as you can and kind of like synergize them, maybe do some crossover, and that's where you start creating value, because that's where college used to succeed. It used to be an avenue to access information, which with the internet now everybody can access a lot of information, especially stuff that you get in undergrad and even grad school. And that used to be proprietary information. But now, as gamers, you know, the adjustment to information is more important than access to information. Well, I mean, that's not necessarily true. I mean, you need both, but like at some point, you know, we're trying to adjust to what we can versus access. So if you, I don't know if this is a conversation you can have like right away or whatever to help your relation with your parents with this. It's like, not, you're not ditching school, but the value of schools has changed in this era. It's more of a defensive measure. And also, I would encourage you guys to just get as many achievements as possible, because when the downswing hits, you guys can just like look at the other stuff you did and just not be all in on like you and your poker career. Because man, even me, like I hit one of the worst live downswings in my life my second year of propping. Like I literally never I've dealt with worse online, but I'd never seen a live string of cards worse than that. Was just dealt loser, dealt loser, dealt loser, dealt. It's just like, and I was bitching to like Dan, Zach, and JJ, and then like Dan, Zach slapped me in the face and knocked some sense in me. Like, you sound like one of these bad players, and he's like, you know, like some of the hands I was asking JJ, I was like, he's like, that's a normal hand. Like, you were just dealt the losing hand, but you start like questioning yourself. But the more things you do on top of poker, it's like you could just be like, yeah, I'm not a dumb person. I'm not worthless. This is just a bad stretch. And you can, you know, use that to develop, you know, other things. Whereas like poker, unfortunately, is the opposite of other industries. The better you get, nobody wants to play with you. So at some point, it's a great stability thing. And Jesse Martin's podcast, who just won the $2 million in DFS, like he mentioned this too. Like he and I and a bunch of my prop coworkers and a bunch of people, we got into poker for stability. And, you know, same thing with Dylan Weissman, just like, when he went back to poker after failed startups, like this is actually, ironically, a stable thing in, you know, as a profession. So like we can always go back to the mid stakes and be winning players. High stakes is just like it's not a meritocracy of who gets into play. There's so many other aspects which, you know, you guys know about intersensing. So that's where this knowledge, you guys and your generation could prepare yourself. Like you crush these stakes, maybe higher, maybe higher. And then at some point, you already know the ceiling is there and you don't need to like ram your head against that ceiling. You could, you know, start doing other stuff.
Yeah, so, and I guess from the downswing perspective, that's one of the great things about online is that, especially if you put in volume, it's different if you're an online pro and don't play that much volume. In my case, I'm a volume junkie and I just love playing the game. And I probably play about 60, 70, 80,000 hands a month. So I'm going to go through downswings effectively faster, as well as I already have the mentality of I'm going to go on downswings in my career. That is the most standard thing possible. It would be very unstandard to not have a losing stretch of 100K hands and things of that nature. It feels like it's going to last forever, but one of the quotes I've read, and it's just kind of stuck with me since, is you never know when lightning is going to strike, at least in an online environment, because you can just have effectively a 100K break-even stretch, maybe a losing stretch, and then out of nowhere just win 20, 30 buy-ins at once. Where you don't, like, the worst thing you could do is change what you're doing or feel a certain way, especially if you have a track record of proving yourself in an online environment. In live, it's just a little bit different because you don't play, you just don't get to play as many hands. It's just a time thing. Like I've played enough hands in my career for 17 months effectively to where live players they'll never even play that much in 50. And that's just the reality and the difference of the game styles. Is one of these games you get to realize your edge over a decent period of time. The other one, the edge is much bigger, and you're going to realize it just because it's that apparent, but you just don't get to put in that same amount of volume. So every hand matters that much more. And additionally, when you go on a downswing for a certain amount of time, like months and things of that nature, that'll take me a week to play online, tops. So it's like life feels like it's going in slow motion. So it hurts that much more when every single day you grind and put in a losing session and grind and lose a couple buy-ins and this, that, and the other. To where it's not like you're doing anything wrong. It's just it's just a distribution of the cards. And that's not something you can control. You can control how you react, and I can control how I move forward and effectively either alter my strategy in a way where I might be leaking and make some improvements, or just keep doing what I'm doing. Because if I have a long enough sample size and see that, okay, you're a winning player over X amount of time, it's probably not you being the effective problem unless there's a mental leak somewhere, which is a whole different story on how to improve at poker and mindset issues and things of that nature.
And Dr. GTO's got some magic there. Dylan Weissman. Justin, you want to chime in?
Yeah, so I agree with what Landon said. It's just like a lot easier said than done, right? It's like when you're losing, I don't think anyone thinks they play better when they're losing than when they're winning, right? So it's like, yeah, exactly. So like even the best players mindset wise, right? Like maybe like the very best are playing the same, and it's like, okay, like maybe like a little bit worse. But it's like very, very hard to get to that point. You have to be very robotic and compartmentalize your emotions and make it so you can play like very similar. It's like if you're playing a little bit worse, like it shouldn't be that big a deal because it's like you're still going to have an edge in the games if you have that like documented in the past, right? If you know you're beating the games. But as that compounds with a downswing, right, it's like very hard for us as humans to wrap our heads around variance. So it's like, well, like even as you said, Wayne, like you're playing standard hands, and it's like, did I do something wrong here? Like we start to lose a little bit of confidence in ourselves, and it's like, well, maybe people just got a lot better. Maybe I'm worse. Maybe I was just getting variance in my favor when I was winning. It's very it's when we talk about it, it sounds so much easier than it actually is, right? Because like in the moment, we're just like feeling all these things, especially like after the session or after like multiple sessions in a row, right? Yeah, but I agree with what Landon said about live and online, right? Because it's like the live scene is just going to be the edge you're going to have is a lot bigger, but you're just going to have a lot smaller sample of hands to play. So it's like online, you're probably going to reduce variance because if you put in a lot of volume, you can actually put in a lot more volume than live. But live, you can have these huge edges and win rates, but you're going to play hands where there could be a stretch where you just get coolers a lot and cold deck and you can't do anything.
So one thing that probably you guys intuitively know, but maybe it's good to quantify these things. It's like obviously poker broadcast is like no limit hold'em. So you guys are obviously on the right track to developing that. But for profitability, you guys can like diverge into like PLO, mixed game, or whatever, and you'll see the competition is just like far less. If you think that your comparative advantage over people in no limit hold'em is like there, you'll see bigger edges elsewhere. That's where you see other people, say Dan Zach, like start branching off. And but if you have a no limit hold'em background, then you could always come back to mainstream like poker media. That's something that that I did. Like people don't see me playing no limit hold'em that much. Actually, if you look in the archives live at the bike now, I have a 5-10 session, 2.55, and a 1-2 no limit online. And it's like I still have a million hands online and like 100,000 hands live. I just I have a very wide repertoire in which I choose to like whichever direction I go. Like oftentimes when I look in the no limit games of the bike, I'm just like, I'll do better in the other games. And obviously I have to work on live at the bike. And a lot of the profit for big bet games is you need to find somebody who loses their will, and in that moment you catch them. Whereas like in the fixed limit games, it's more of an attrition battle and micro transactions in which like you have to know the plays like very well. In big bet games, you got to get paid in the big pots, or get the right bluffs. That's something that's just like you guys know this. Like you have to be very focused, and then whatever hour it is, hour 2, hour 10. Or 24 in a session, like then when that guy's just like lost his will, then you just like capitalize it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that at least in the sense of practicality and poker in two different ways is there's the way of wanting to play high stakes and getting to be the best and the ego battling and battling regs and all of the sort of natural things that some people do have. But then there's also the aspect of trying to find the softest games possible, aka bum hunting, and trying to figure out where your win rate is, how to maximize your win rate, and then doing all these other soft skills like table changing, seat selecting, this, that, and the other. And there's a lot of people that have a very successful career in poker where they might not even be the best poker player, but they're very good at everything else and just always get in the softest games and always going to have the highest win rate and always play sessions to where they're at their mental peak and then just quit after, regardless of if they're winning or losing or not, and just effectively mastering the soft skills. And that's very untalked about in the sense of a lot of like really quality players understand that that's also another way to succeed in poker. Is like you don't have to be the best, but if you're in the best games, then you don't really have to effectively be that good. So it's finding the threshold of being decently good at poker, but also doing the soft skills really well to where you still get invited to those other games. And then it's like trying to find that fine line could be another very viable career path in poker. And that's why poker is great, is there's a lot of different ways to win and succeed. You basically get to choose your own adventure.
Right. It's kind of like what Wayne mentioned earlier about as you start to get better and be perceived as one of the stronger players, the games that you get to play in kind of start to dry up unless you're like a very real, like big personality or something like Daniel Negreanu or Phil Hellmuth, where it's like you have name brand value, right? So it's like a real big balance of a mix of things. And I think getting into mixed games is like a really smart way to make it so your games won't dry up, because not everyone is going to be amazing at every mixed game, right? And there's going to be like if Landon started playing the mixed games, I bet he could hold his own in the no limit, probably be a winner in the no limit section. It's just like he wouldn't know what to do in the other sections. So it's like if we studied what to do in the other games and got some experience in them, we'd always have the no limit background, as you said, Wayne. But it's like when you add in more games, there's naturally going to be more edge in different games, and you can win and lose the most money in no limit, right? And PLO, of course, as well as high variance. And if you can hold your own or maybe achieve slight profitability in the other games, it just allows you to actually like play more at a higher
options.
stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, like, each games have their advantages and disadvantages. So for no limit hold'em, it's just like, yeah, you can improve your play. But if you're in a game where it's like raise full, you can be the best player there. You're just not making very much. And there's like times when I was probably like 5 a.m. in the morning, and this guy would play like mixed games. We're playing like Badusi and Badesi, and he just like draws 4. Like, you know, you better learn how to play Badusi or Badesi, because I guarantee you that game's worth a hell of a lot more than any no limit game. And like I'm definitely not even close to the best with these things, but if you just, you know, are fundamentally sound, that's one of the approaches that Jesse Martin took. Like when he plays a new game, he just plays, you know, super tight and plays well. But he doesn't need to do any like splashy plays or any fancy plays, getting like minor, whatever, like minor edges in something that looks like a super sexy play. So yeah, one of the things too is like when I was coming up, it was like 7-card stud, limit hold'em, and then when no limit came out, Prolid Friedman, who I'm gonna have on the pod too, like he was a massive inspiration on my no limit game, and just like I just you know, just opened a bunch of doors. But it's so different now. Like even Doug Polk's and Ryan Fee's generation, I'm listening to them talk, and already the learning process was so different. Although they did a lot of stuff by pen and paper, just like, you know, my generation did. But like when it comes to you guys, like Landon, I saw you using solvers, just like constantly testing yourself. So how's the learning process doing? Or going?
I mean, yeah, it's at least for poker, there's a bunch of different ways you can study and learn. And the most effective way, at least for the online environment, to an extent, at least for certainty standpoint, would be like using and playing against the solver, because the solver effectively gives up no win rate. It doesn't give up any EV. So if you learn how to effectively not give up EV, your win rate might not be the highest, but you're not losing. And that's kind of the big deal about solver work and things of that nature. So if like, it's almost like poker is becoming a memorization path at the top, but there's always going to be games where that's not the case. And there's always like, it's always going to be possible to have a profitable career at lower stakes games where games are softer, and you don't necessarily have to memorize certain boards and textures and things of that nature. But there is a threshold where all of the best players are just using solvers by default. And all the good regs understand that, and solvers and things of that nature. And recreational players at lower stakes games are still not either aware or cognizant, or even know what they are and how detrimental to the logical part of the game it actually is. Because the solver is basically like the AI is a brain. So like if you know how to master the solve, you now have a brain. And part of the glory of poker back in the day was people were kind of firing at each other with their intuition and like willpower and heart of like running a barrel because they think it works, or they want it to work, or whatever reason. For now, you can effectively quantify how good that is based on EV. And that's why there's going to be a point in a threshold where you don't need solver work to be as good as you can, but you are going to need it against tougher competition, just because that's the nature of the game. Is the better the players, the more EV they're actually effectively losing, to where it just gets to an equilibrium standpoint of nobody's losing anything. And that's just...
You touched on a few things that I kind of want to add on to, where it's like solvers are a very useful tool, right? Where using Solver, you can input your ranges versus their range, and then see how it's going to interact on whatever board textures, and then if you can node lock in scenarios. But its upside is capped to an extent because you have to know the range of the person you're playing against. Like, you know your own ranges, but you have to understand how the ranges are going to interact, right? So if you know that, the solver is just infinitely useful, right? Because then it's going to give you strategies that are unexploitable and often very hard to play against because it's not something that would be a very natural play for a human sometimes, right? But certain things are just going to be outside of what you can use it for, where it's just if you're playing in a game and it's going 4 ways to every flop, right? And it's like, well, now I have to understand how I'm going to interact with my opponents in this situation where maybe they're over bluffing or over stabbing, or maybe there's never bluffing here, and et cetera, et cetera. So they're very useful for environments where people are playing similarly, right? Where we're using similar ranges, like monk or solver ranges that are just very not going to lose and beat the rake, but not everyone is going to be playing that way. So if you can understand your opponents better, then the solver gets a lot more useful when you're thinking of a spot, or you go back and run a spot in a hand where you played versus someone specific, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Part of it is just like live or online, especially online, where your opponent's cards are revealed. You could you see something that's on the bottom, and you're like, okay, now you reconstruct the range, and whereas like somebody who's playing fit or fold that was tight, like you could move that range all the way up, and try to exploit that however you can. Yeah, so I mean, you guys touched up on really good points, and it's just like this is one of the reasons that this custom solver custom solver software that exists for the other games, but it's obviously not as simple as the Hold'em variants, and that's where I warned the public. I'm like, for broadcast, you definitely do Hold'em, no limit Hold'em, but in order for profitability, you may want to branch in other things. And that being said, it's just like a lot of these things that solvers are proving. Prolog Friedman also mentioned in his tweets. He's like, "Oh, I was doing GTO from back in the day," but yeah, we were, but we also had to hide it too. And like nowadays, back then it was more exploitative strategies, and it was a lot of aggression. And I think Doug Polk and Ryan Fee's era, especially, it's like you have to maintain aggression, but there are more defensive strategies, profitable defensive strategies that came up, like say inducing the bluff, or how to deal with ranges, post-flop ranges from the big blind, and so on. And now with what's going on now, that's where it's kind of like more balanced out. And it was funny that like when blockers became such a big topic, like in the recent years, it's like Prolog said, like he was talking about blockers 15 years ago when he was being videoed, and he mentioned it. It's just like it's just something that we didn't want to publicize very much, but we were thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff's kind of public now to an extent, right? Of like, as people improve and as there's these training sites that are coming up and this, that, and the other, there's just going to be more viable information that can be proven to be true because of the solver. And you can kind of see that through certain things of, okay, if you look at a certain spot and if you have enough flush blocker, the solver is going to choose to bluff with that combo more. In other repetitive spots. So the solver doesn't give you it doesn't tell you why, it just gives you the answer. But if you start seeing the same answer over and over again, a good professional will start coming to certain conclusions on why certain hands are good candidates for doing what they do. And now that that's effectively open to the public, in the sense of anyone that has $500 can now buy a solver. But the thing about it is the utility in asking it the right questions and inputting ranges, inputting bet sizes, inputting all these certain things. That's an entirely different skill set. And the best in an online environment that are reg battling each other are very good at asking the specific questions needed to find a definite answer through their study. That just wasn't around back then, at least publicly. Because maybe, I'm not entirely sure, there were solvers or things of that nature back in the day, but you couldn't just buy them back in the day. The dream.
Yeah, we did stuff by hand. Even Doug Polk and Ryan Fee's generation was they were doing stuff on pen and paper, just like you just estimate, like what was going on. And one of the advantages back then too was that people played more predictably and more like visually and rationally. Like if you see somebody limping, they're not limping with 7 deuce offsuit, right? So there's different classifications. There's suited connectors, ace-x suited, pocket pairs, offsuit Broadway. So those 4 generic categories, if you just eliminate several of them, or if you eliminate 2 of them, you have your solver right there. Solver's like right here, and then you just deal with it accordingly. Like if they limp with ace-x suited, you raise, they call, ace high flop. They can actually have an ace there, in which that's if they never have or rarely have ace-x suited, then they don't have an ace, and you just kind of go from there.
Yeah, it comes to in like an assumptive base, and then I guess Justin can touch up on this after from a live environment, but it becomes very assumptive based. But then again, there are certain trends that appear over time from either having a sample with certain people or things of that nature, where it's not necessarily like conclusive to a full degree of 100%, but 90, 85, like you use what you can, and you're just going to get you use what you can, and it's not provable to an extent, but you sort of develop your own feelings and things of that nature. So if you see somebody continually limp hands that isn't premiums, you can probably come to a conclusion of they don't have the top of their range as much as they should.
Right.
And that's kind of using that and extrapolating that across the game tree is how the best live players do what they do, is making the assumptions on how someone's range looks based on a specific sample and things like time. But in online environments, it's not the same at all, because you play more volume. You can just get punished over a massive period of time for creating a false assumption.
Right. I want to stress that what a solver does is make an unexploitable strategy, right? And it's going to be often very good, but sometimes you're going to want to use an exploitative strategy, right? Like if you're not going to be playing with certain players that much online, or like a game's only running for like a short period of time, if say it was like a high stakes game, or if you're playing live and you might not see certain players ever again, like with someone you've never seen, or someone who only plays like once a week and is not going to pick up on you doing certain things, there's deviations you can make versus specific people, right? And they're going to do better than what the solver would recommend you to do, right? It's like exploitative play is a thing for a reason, where if you're 3-betting someone who's overfolding like a lot pre-flop and you see him fold like every 3-bet, it's like, okay, maybe you don't do it every hand, but you do it enough where it's like going to make you a little extra win rate, and then you do those spots versus other people post-flop where it's like, okay, they're not defending properly versus check raise, they're over c-betting small on certain textures, etc. And it's like all those things add up to you increasing your win rate in spots where the solver might not take the line that you took, where you're playing exploitably, but so are they. And it's, if you're going to be playing with certain players like a lot of the time, especially at a higher stakes game, then the player's going to be thinking a lot more, right? And that's where the solver becomes a lot more important, where you don't want to be in a spot where you're capped to something, you can't have a certain hand, and then it allows your opponent to play a lot better versus you, which I think is something you might see like on the high stakes live at the bike game. Garrett does really well about making it so it's like very difficult to play against him.
Oh yeah.
Because no idea what he could have at certain points, and that's why he gets paid so much in spots where he can have it, but it's also where he gets a lot of folds when he's bluffing. So it's like managing that fine line where you get the folds when you're bluffing and you get paid when you have the value in the right percentage of the time, right? Like more than 50% of the time for each of those things.
So I'm constantly throwing Garrett under the bus. Like back then, like he'll have sessions at Commerce at like 10-20, he'll just like raise every hand and outplay you post flop, and just like like Jay Rosenkrantz, who was on 2 months of 2 million. When I watched them play on live, like I'm like, yeah, we're from the same era where it's like any 2 cards, any spot, like we have the capability of playing, even if it's a minus EV play, you do it and then you navigate yourself out of it. Some of the stuff I have for Behind the Live the Bike paywall, I think there's only 3 videos up now, but just like there's some exploitative things I was like never wanted to tell people, but I'm just like, fuck it, like I'm on broadcast, so it's like we're in COVID times, so there's no Live the Bike live stream, so I might as well just, I gotta put some useful content out there. So if you guys like go into archives, you could see a lot of blind versus blind in like steal situations where I don't really have it, but I win the pot. And that's a lot of low stakes and mid stakes exploitative things in which I do quantify as I'm doing. I'm like, There's something that probably here's one example. I'm just gonna throw myself under the bus. Like small blind against big blind. If small blind raises and you have eights in the big blind, I mean, I'm pretty sure most of the solvers are intuitively would 3-bet out of the big blind. Is that correct? What do you guys think?
Yeah, they're 3-betting things for sure.
So one of the exploitative things to balance what I do is I just flat call and just play post flop because he's going to miss most of the time, and a lot of the bad flops for you can get away from. So if you just, instead of allocating the resources to 3-bet and just risk getting 4-bet, especially in the lower stakes games who do play more face up, you can flat and just like call almost any flop. And just like, if he checks the turn, you could take it away from him. Or if he still barrels the turn after you represent something, then, you could either raise and take it away from him, or you could fold. That way, you fudge the numbers. If people are running HUDs against you, it's not that reliable because a hand that you would normally 3-bet, now you're 3-betting a different percentage, which may or may not include Jack 3 offsuit to take away the pot pre-flop. But there's just some stuff that like I wish I never thought in my lifetime I would tell people that, but whatever. Cat's out of the bag. I'm not playing online much after COVID. So.
Right.
You guys get the value. Everyone watching.
You guys have to subscribe to the archives if you want to see. Like I get away with a lot of fucking monkey shit that like I don't want the people to know, but I guess if you pay, it's only $20 a month. And you can use it on other people. I guarantee you it works on like the average population. Just like you guys said, if you play against somebody, and I talked about this with Darren Elias, if you play against somebody that you're not going to play very often, they don't know what to expect from you. And if they don't know if you're like a pro or a super pro, then it's, you got to figure it out for yourself, which
I guess we're lucky in that aspect too, because we're younger, so we don't look like we're very, very intimidating at all. At least I look like a clown when I play live poker.
I fucking hate to come in.
At higher stakes games, it's funny because at higher stakes games it's different because the people that know that like if you're like young 20s playing in these games, like these higher stake games, like 25, 50, 10, 20,
yeah, for sure.
Like they're not stupid. They don't think you just hear like firing off your entire roll. But if I play 2-5 live and no one's seen me before, 5-10 to an extent, and I always have like a hat on because I have pretty long hair, they just think I'm some like weird degen kid that's like going to like bust his roll, which works out great, but it is what it is, and that's part of the I guess the illusion of the young kid, and the older generation doesn't want to lose pots to the young kids. But
so like one of the things I told Chris Wayner too is just like the TV players are not always the best players. Like you're going to see some guys who are just like amazing, but really there's so many people that are off camera that are insane. Like there's people I know I played with, and there's a group of people I don't know and never played with. They've had like 20-year careers, and just like they're known as like goats, but like to the public, if you mention their screen name or their real name, people are like, who the hell's that guy? And if you've been around for like over a decade, you're like, you don't know who the fuck is, you're not a true fan of the game. And I don't want to.
You go on. Oh, so
I just don't want to blow. I don't want to blow their cover because it's not like
right. So like I guess the big thing is like there's a difference between being very good at poker and being branded as one of the best people in poker.
Yes.
Those are two very different things. Of being talented and being a winning poker player, or having the brand of being a winning poker player. And those take two different. They take different skill sets to effectively sort of cultivate. Where one of them is more like hardcore skill, like you're in the streets, you're battling every single day, and you're good. And because most people that are very, very good don't want the spotlight of being known as the best players. So it's a very rare case where there's people that want to be very good at poker and skilled at poker, as well as being a public figure. And
yeah, I was going to talk about that as well, because this is the first time people are seeing me online, seeing that I'm Justin. Normally I just go by Harbz. I was staying anonymous on Twitter. No one really knows who I am.
I got him out, guys. I got him out.
Did it.
Wayne did it for you guys.
I just like got it. You're like the, those like I don't even know. There's mud puppies, and you just have to like fill it with like Coke and the egg yolk, and then they pop out. Just kidding. I did want to ask, like, what games were you guys curious? I know you mentioned mixed games. What direction do you think would be the good to go, or the good direction to go? Because I always suggest PLO as the second game, but it's not
Yeah,
necessarily
I think
universal.
PLO is like a natural step forward to go from No Limit because it just there's similarities, but also you get 4 cards and the blockers are going to be a lot more important and relevant. And there's just like a lot of people we kind of know. Like obviously Joey is very into PLO, and then you mentioned Dylan Wiseman. He's like I think he just released an upswing course, and that would definitely be valuable to check out if moving in that direction. And
Yeah.
it's just like it's easier to transition to than something like I don't know, like you're mentioning Badoo, like 7 card stud, like high low, and like
Oh, don't do stud. Like the stud was one in my history. Two, there was a commerce game, like a very consistent 100 200 game in which um, I've been told by some of the regs like they've had nightmare sessions against me where I just like ran super good. And I'm not gonna mention anything on top of that, but yeah, just like there were certain berry patches that don't exist anymore or just like rarely come up. So it just wouldn't be as good of a wouldn't be effective to spend time in certain things when the game's dead. But they were important in certain eras.
yeah,
So yeah.
I think PLO is definitely probably the direction that's best to move in, just because there's still going to be a lot of action there, and it's also what there. I mean, No Limit. I don't think No Limit is even close to solved, but PLO is even less close to solved. So it's like
Yeah.
that's very good about that too. Landon, do you want to talk about PLO maybe a little bit or something else?
Yeah, I guess for in my case, um, I do want to see where I can go with No Limit and then find my path there. But I definitely think at some point I am going to be interested in PLO and the game PLO for sure at least, and then maybe other games like other mixed games as well, and kind of trying to see what that environment's like because now even thinking about it, I think to myself, oh, like I have no want or need to know mixed games, but I don't know what I'm missing out on in the sense of just how good games are for one, and how skill based they are in themselves as well. Because maybe there's something there that I'm going to enjoy. But right now, like I'm just so focused on like the no limit path that when I do get to the point of switching game types and finding how to improve in those, I still have the network of people I can talk to help me improve at those games and help me sort of find my way in that aspect. And I'm just really I love the NL, the no limit hype, and that's where I'm at the moment. But things will probably change in the future, and maybe I'll start to sort of figure out what I want at that point. But right now, I'm really, really happy with where I'm at and where I'm going.
So one of the basic things I'll drop some advice for you guys in the public is that these triple draw games, whether it's Deuce of Seven, whether it's Ace of Five or Badoogie, if you see somebody like limp and then draw two, or God forbid, draw three, et cetera, raise and
God
draw
forbid.
three, those are worth a lot, and that's very brainless. And all you have to do is play tight. Like I'll call myself out. I sent Ryan via a basic triple draw chart, and I'll send it to you guys after. And it's by no means advanced strategy. But it should hold over for like if some guy is drawing a large amount of cards, you better fucking sit in that game because it's going to be worth more than when you're playing like no enrollment. Guarantee you.
Yeah,
But those are things that like you don't need to go headfirst into these triple draw games. Like learning very basics is kind of like learning to play tight and hold them. Like you just
yeah,
learn the top seven, top nine hands and hold them, and playing position. You can't be that bad.
it's true.
No.
Can't. Nope.
Um,
Definitely. Like, definitely.
yeah, how has COVID affected your guys' outlook on life and poker?
Well, for me, from an online environment, games have effectively been better than they have been, I guess, in a while. There's some people that don't think that's the case, but at least from what my experience, games have been good and live is kind of dying. Not dying, but live, you're not allowed to play live until things open up again.
Yeah.
And the effective live pros and the regs that used to make a living in live poker, whether they tried to play online or not, they probably have. And that influx of live regs just isn't as studied as the online reg. So if live players start playing 500 NL, 1K NL on where I'm playing and other online regs are playing, we're just going to scoop up all that EV. And it's not to say that there's not some live regs that are winning online still, but a vast majority of them are not, and they have to effectively move down, which is the reason why a lot of good live online players can play any stake live, and live players that play at 2.5 or 5.10 have to effectively move down because they're just not as studied and the games just aren't as the games are softer live.
Yeah.
So games for me have been great, and live pros are now sort of realizing like maybe they're not as fundamentally sound or as talented as they think they are, because in the online environment you get thrown into the environment of the online reg. Like these have been the best 2 months of my career up to this point, and I'm not necessarily looking forward to it because I do want to get back in the live streets and I do want the world to return to the way it was to an extent. But right now, the best thing I can do for my own career is just sit in the seat and just play some volume.
No,
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree too. It's a lot harder playing online than it is live. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. It's just the theory-based aspect of playing way more hands, so you have to be way more precise about your actions, makes it so that if you have small leaks, those leaks get exacerbated. And if you have big leaks, you're probably going to lose a lot of money like very quickly. So I definitely agree with that. The games have been pretty good online where I've been playing. I think there's just a dilution effect, right? Where people who are just at home and don't have much to do, maybe because everything was closed for a while and the live casinos were closed, were playing online. So I think the games, there was a little bit of an improvement. I haven't been playing online as much as Landon at all, but I was playing right when it started pretty much because I wasn't playing live once the casinos closed. And I've been winning, so it's been good, but it definitely is a different feel, right? Where it's like I had some background when I was like 15, 16, 17, 18 playing online. Then I started playing live and enjoyed that like a lot more just because I like playing versus like opponents where I'm trying to get a specific like exploit off in the moment, or I'm trying to understand how someone's playing like over a long sample if they're playing with me a lot and like battle against more the player that I am. And when I'm playing online, I'm not playing with like the same people like every session, right? I'm playing with just like some random people on anonymous sites, and then on sites with usernames, I'm not playing with the same people like every single time. But no, it's been fine. I've actually started dabbling a little bit more in tournaments, which are pretty fun, but not as not even close to as consistent as cash games. Obviously, with the variance, it's pretty frustrating sometimes, just because as big blinds get lower effective, you just can't really do much other than jam, and the variance is just going to ramp up. And it's been good though. I think the games have improved because of COVID, but not as much as some people think, and they haven't gotten worse. That's for sure. I think.
I mean, for the ecosystem, it's not good because, like, I'm sure you guys know this too. Like, the poker ecosystem relies on external and recreational money because it's a luxury good. Like, when it's it's elastic. Like when times are bad, poker doesn't go, but it's just because people they're bored, they don't have a choice, and then when they run out of money, which I've seen massive games, they're not sustainable. Like the loss rates, even the pros like lose and then the games die. Then what? You start the next level down, or you have to start over. It's just like it's really ugly. So this goes for all the poker players aspiring to be professionals or just in general. You choose where you want to go. Like I used to be far more competitive at it, but now I'm doing live the bike broadcast and propping, and just like it's a very comfortable life. And I'm obviously very blessed that these options even exist. Like and the second, like Doug Polk or Ryan Fee and Upswing, they're all doing their training course. Well, guess what? If you want to do a training course, you need to like one up them, or want to do a poker stream, you need to one up live with the bike. Like, good luck. It's always possible, but just fairly unlikely. And what's the upside?
I think one thing with all of this has been the like the Poker Bros games and like the app games, right? Where it's like, I think it's pretty dangerous because we've already seen site or like app games on the apps where people have, or that's just like ridiculous. Where it's like no one's really going to be beating this except for like a very select amount of players. But like it's also, you feel like you're winning because there's a lot of recreational players like on those apps where it's seems like the games are very good, but you're also getting in a really bad spot rake wise, and then also you're not sure about the security of where you're playing at. So like,
yeah.
I've tried to avoid playing on them as much as possible. I've played in a few private games, but I try to avoid them just because unless you're really certain about having your money like locked up, you're not gonna like lose it in some way. I just don't think it's worth it to try to play those.
Landon, any comment?
On the idea of like these apps and private game type of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I would probably stray away from them as well, just because there's no necessarily like, it's almost not, it's close because like there's some games that are worth playing, and if you do end up getting the brunt end of the stick and getting effectively scammed or looted or whatever, like maybe the game is just too good to pass up, and if that happens, it happens. Because sure, like you are gonna have a problem and potentially lose some money, but then maybe like that's one of the best things you can do for yourself in the moment is playing one of these one of the games. And if you're like okay with getting effectively scammed potentially, then by all means, hopefully you're with someone you trust, because sometimes maybe the game is just too good to pass up. And
Yeah,
I don't have the answer, and I don't play in any of these apps myself just because I don't necessarily effectively need to, or like I'm not in a position where if I just get scammed, like that's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to put myself in that position. But there's other people that can, and if they want to take that, like no risk, no reward, basically. So
Yeah,
if you can afford to get scammed, like by all means try to hopefully don't. But if you can't, it's not worth thinking about.
That's definitely part of the equation. And Lyman mentioned is like, factor in a percentage that you don't get paid from these things, or something happens like the Black Friday and other things have happened to people like me, or COVID, like just completely shuts down everything. So with Joe Ingram's challenge to the Euros for Landon, you want to comment on that? Landon?
On what?
Oh, Joe Ingram issuing a challenge to Euros.
Oh yeah. Right. So I've been in the lab. I've been in the lab these past couple of days, and I'm excited for it in the sense of he does have people that are going to take action and definitely will take action. We're not entirely sure of the logistics and the idea, but the idea is now out there and it is now spoken into existence. So because of that, I guess the most effective way that I'm going to study and improve and get better in that sort of idea is to get in the lab and play against the solver and become the solver kid. Like to an extent, like that's the best way someone's going to be able to improve it heads up, and as well as just playing and sort of getting a feel for it. And
so is it just heads up? It's not like booking or cross booking.
I'm not entirely sure the whole idea and logistics yet. Hopefully, if we change it to six max, figure something out there, I would be a lot happier with that.
I think that was his idea. There was like a win rate thing or like cross booking thing, but maybe heads up in there as well. I want to comment on it because I've seen a lot of Landon's play, and I've actually played a heads up challenge versus him where he beat. Like no one's gonna outwork him, like that's for sure. If he thinks that, like if any of these Euros think that they're gonna be more studied or have played more hours, like they're wrong. So at that point, it's just like, what resources are they gonna have at their disposal versus Landon? And I know Landon's gonna have like a good community around him to like
support.
make him think about these spots. So it's like, I'm behind Landon in this. Like if anyone wants action, you can hit me up on Twitter at Harbz.
I mean, it's tough, right? Because at least if it's a heads up environment, because I just haven't put any time into heads up, and there are people from outside the U.S. that their entire game strategy, even though they're my age and the amount of time they've been playing poker, is in heads up, especially with super crushers in their own respective group. Like
Yeah.
I know that there's some people that online like know who Button Clicker is, and he's a 19-year-old super crusher kid that plays high stakes heads up.
Yeah.
And if I get thrown in the ring against this guy, and I'm playing against this guy right now, I'm going to get smashed, and I'll crossbook against myself. I'll throw that out there right now. But it's just about like it was just an idea he had, and I think something is going to happen from it. Whether
Yeah.
it stays heads up, whether it changes to 6 max, whether it changes to something of that nature, we'll figure that out when it gets there. But just the idea of like seeing other young talent in the industry that effectively isn't known just because they're busy doing their own thing and being these super crusher kids that are doing really well for themselves, but they don't necessarily want the spotlight of being a public figure, because that's an entirely different thing. But I just personally am also interested in finding people that are around my age and skill level, whether in the United States or not, and just kind of seeing what happens there, because we're probably very similar in that regard of having a very strong work ethic,
Oh,
having a
yeah.
very strong community around them, and just learning from people like that would be amazing for both people, like not just me, but other people like outside of the US that kind of want to talk poker strategy or kind of do what they're doing and sort of connect with people their age as well. Because at least in the skill level and the skill set that I'm at and they're at in themselves, it's a lot more advanced than other kids around us in our age that don't even understand gambling itself, let alone being that successful in what it is that they're doing. And it would just be a really great thing for me and as well as these
Publicity.
other,
Yeah.
yeah, just to be able to kind of talk to people effectively like me in the same kind of situation I am, and figuring out how to traverse from this being really good at poker at the age we are, and sort of seeing what else life has to offer outside of this online screen.
And clearly Joey's a genius of trying to, increase attention in the poker world.
Joey's the fucking best.
He's like holding it down on his own. But
Yeah.
so we gotta support him as much as possible. But the yeah, just basically just over the decades, like when something comes up, like whether it's the Dirt Challenge or Galifon, any World Series main event or a Hand of the Day at Live of the Bike, like these things all keep interest within poker, and some pros are like not happy these things happen. But I'm like, what's the worst for poker is that people don't come in, they don't stay. So we know that people have a skill cap in every industry. Like you're gonna have to, work harder or just hope that your skill cap is higher than the other guy. Because like if people leave, that's the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah. And I guess like it's also a fine line as well as like keeping people involved, because it's like the way you kind of like look at poker itself, right? It's like if you want to market it as like a super high quality strategy game, that's a different thing than making poker fun and keeping effectively like the no gamble, no future alive. And there's different ways you like training sites basically are trying to keep the people that want to improve in poker and to a certain extent. And then there's other ways like the old high stakes poker where it's like they're never like there's no strategy talk in high stakes poker effective, right? It's just they're playing high stakes like nosebleed games, and you get to look at what that's like. And that was one of the.
What do you guys think of those players? I mean, I've played with like at least half of them.
They're fucking. I mean, back in the day, they were the best that there was.
I thought their personalities were just like amazing. Like just seeing the things that, especially Sammy Farha and Jamie Gold, right? Where it's like that notorious hand where it's aces versus kings, and oh man, it's crazy. Like there's just not a lot of that anymore, right? Where it's like obviously back then there was less known about the game and people had a lot more money just because the industry was like probably at its peak, right? But it's just it's hard. I know PokerGo is trying to do things like to keep the content or keep people watching, but it's hard compared to when you have that in the background, right? Where it's like I know Joey has talked about this too, where it's we need to do things to keep it fresh and promote the game. And it's like the Phil Galfond challenge didn't get nearly enough hype as it should have, right? Like there should have been mainstream news.
Oh, I mean that's tough because that's like like people in the poker industry shouldn't take things personally. It's like, why is esports on ESPN now? It's because of COVID. Like other companies have their agenda and motivation. It's not like they are disrespecting certain things. It's more like they got to look after themselves, and that's something that I think people take too personally. Like there's a topic I want to bury. Like if people take shots at me or Live the Bike, it's like or something that benefits them but doesn't necessarily benefit me or Live at the Bike. It's just like, okay, like why are we here to serve you? Like, you know, this like if we reach out to somebody, we're hoping it works out. If it doesn't, it's nothing personal. And same thing is it's like Live at the Bike doesn't exist to serve the public. Like we are an operation. We need to do what we got to do for ourselves. So like
Yeah.
same thing, like these other broadcasts like SportsCenter, ESPN, when they're reporting, you know, some certain super users, that's for their benefit for viewership. And I think just be blessed that what we're doing is even on the map. Like, and it's like this is the real world. No one's gonna hand it to you. I think again, Joey's done a good job. Phil Galfon's doing a good job with this challenge. I was surprised how much attention it got, and you know, glad for it. Like a legend like Phil Galfon, and then come back. You know, spoilers, but all we could do is just keep moving forward and creating content and hope for the best. That it makes a big enough splash. If it doesn't, oh well. You know, like try again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair point for sure.
Yes, and you know, some like say Dan Zach, like before Live at the Bike, like I'd played with him. You know, we were a little bit even now. Now he's just like way above me, but just like he broke out on Live at the Bike in the public's eye, and then he won a bracelet. Guy's got a long career ahead of him, and you know that like he's been at it for like a long time. Even Dylan Weissman, you know, he's been at it for a long time, but only now do we start seeing him. But because they're gonna keep at it, their careers are just gonna keep going up, and then maybe one day they are household names like, you know, Durr, Phil Galfon, Helmuth, Ivy, Negreanu, Sveniari, blah blah blah. You know, it's just you got to put in your time.
Yeah, and exactly. And like maybe there's people that were playing poker that didn't get on high stakes poker and this, that, and the other, and people didn't know that they were super wizards. Like,
Yeah.
like it's more likely than not that was the case. Just because either whether they didn't want to leak their anonymity and go from being who they were online to being an online or a high stakes poker staple, right? Like there could be just be people that back in the day made their seven
I know
figures
them
online.
I know several of them, and there's a bunch of people I don't know personally, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, right? We only know, like the public only knows like what they know because that's what they're given, right? If someone doesn't want to go on live at the bike or even high stakes poker, the audience isn't going to know who they are.
Yeah.
But the people who are going to be good will be known by their skill and by their play eventually if they want to.
Yeah. So that's the problem with these like top 10 lists of the players. It's like
the player rankings.
Yeah. I'll be honest, like Doyle's obviously done a very good job. Doyle Brunson's done a very good job being an ambassador of the game. Same with Phil Helmuth, Negreanu, you know, Esfandiari. And just like the world and poker needs people like them to just, you know, keep feeding the audience so it keeps intrigue going. And like, you know, the interest in poker is going down from a hardcore sense, but that's the community's responsibility to put out good content to, you know, entice people to come in. Yeah, speaking of high stakes poker, man, Durr just ran good. Like he just, and the thing is they can filter out the hands, whereas Live with the Bike, the hands aren't filtered out.
Right.
So
right. It's all at once. It's not just like the highlights and the clips of running good and this, that, and the other. But that's an entirely different, like that's a whole different thing, right? Like maybe if high stakes poker wanted to, like they only show the specific hands they wanted to, and people look like absolute wizards,
geniuses
and
or
then
idiots.
That's what the people know them as. Is they're the wizards and they're this, that, and the other because of their character and how marketable they are as a poker personality.
Right.
And that's an entirely different thing than just being good at poker itself. And
yeah, and that's one of the things. Like Helmuth is unfair in the elite. Like maybe he's not an elite cash game player. You know, played cash games with them back in the day, but just like, you know, the way he's portrayed in the media is not really what's going on. The guy's definitely not an idiot. And in multi-table tournaments, like Barry Greenstein mentioned, I think in Ace in the River, it was like he's good against bad players and bad against good players, or something like, or not as good against good players. And I didn't really understand it until I played him or saw him in action. Where, yeah, because the thing is, the high stakes experience community is immune to his antics. Whereas, like, if you can challenge somebody's ego, or you could just like, go off on somebody and they react, that's information that, somebody that's like more quiet at the table, like Bill Ivory or John Juwanda, can't, get that out of somebody. Like, that reaction gets information. And that's very valuable in multi-table tournaments. Like, are you going to refine your own skill in multi-table tournament, or are you going to increase the amount of people who are going to bust to you or punt to you? It's like, it's something when you're younger, you don't really think about it. Then when you get older, you play like, a million hands. You're like, oh, you see all these wide ranges of people and strategies, and you're just like, things aren't that linear. It's like, oh, this player's good, this player's bad. This pro is better than this player. It's like, it's a very weighted, like, rock paper scissors game as well. Like, if you're playing, and you guys probably sense this already, but when you're in a hyper competitive game where it's like one fun player and like 8 super pros or pros and super pros, it's a big, the EV and outcomes is not linear. It's not like there's a number on your forehead. It's like certain styles are going to be better than certain styles. Who the seeding is going to have a big impact as well. There are people that hold over me. I obviously don't remember the people I hold over because I won the pot. But the people that hold over me, I remember. And if they're sitting to my left, or they're stealing my big blind, I'm just like, this is not good. This is gonna, however I should be doing against this table, that particular matchup is gonna chop me a little bit. And that's something that isn't necessarily communicated through media, that it's not linear. Like, a player that's supposedly better than the next guy isn't like absolutely better. It's usually comparative advantage in certain circumstances. And they have weaknesses too. Everyone has weaknesses.
Yeah,
Right.
like,
We're limited in what we see, right? With like the hands, and like you said, high stakes poker edited what they were showing, and we could have seen a stretch where, I mean, there's the stretch where Daniel Negreanu just like got dusted.
Oh,
It's ridiculous, right? Where
yeah.
full house versus the quads of Gus Hansen. It's like, okay, like, what can he just got wrecked every session. It's like, well, he wasn't really playing like that bad, in my opinion, at least. And it's like, when you think about it from a media perspective of portraying the game, it's what high stakes poker did really well is make it accessible to everyone watching, where it was like, it was clear what was happening, and the strategy wasn't too complex but what they were talking about. And it's really hard to relate that to casual viewers unless you have like a really good commentator, which, like, I think Nick Schulman does like an amazing job. Obviously, I mean, he's like the industry standard, like top at this point, where watching him is like so much of a better experience than maybe watching someone else. And I think that's just a lot better for maybe a more casual viewer or recreational who is interested in poker but might not have played a lot or might not know exactly what it's all about, or they want to learn more, right? So it's like, it's very difficult to cater to the wide audience when you have people who are just talking about the strategy, or people who are just talking about advanced concepts, when some people just don't even understand like the simplest form, right?
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you can kind of see that in the Galfon challenge too. Like my friend, a good friend of mine, Henry, did a great job commentating for the Galfon challenge and made it very, very easy for people that were watching to sort of get at least a glimpse on how the strategy was sort of working out with the certain pot size bets and this, that, and the other. And he didn't even have whole cards to do that as well. Like, he just had to do that on the fly, and being able to be successful at that is an entirely different and necessary component to being a great commentator. And they alter the viewing experience by miles, just based on how good they are at making concepts sound like they're easy enough for a recreational player that's never even heard of what a blocker is to effectively understand what, like, the importance. And that's monumental to the viewing experience.
SIT word of the day, it's called layman's terms. So once you use the advanced strategies and you use them in like everyday people's terms, and that was a big learning process I had to do through commentating, that you guys will get an inside scoop. And it's just like, the other thing is, because no limit hold'em is like the standard for televised poker, when you commentate, when you get competent in the other games and start commentating on mixed games or PLO, you learn to translate them into no limit terms, because that's, you know, you got to go by what the audience is going by and not necessarily like what the actual thing. Something I learned coaching and tutoring people, like especially people who just want to have fun and match cards. They just want to play how they play and get better. Like I used to be forceful in trying to turn them into winning players. They don't care. They have other careers. You know, they're just trying to match cards. They just want like improvements here and there on the way that they play. So, you know, we all learn things in life.
Yeah.
Right. No, looking to just become a pro. They have income on the side, and they just want to be in this position where they know what they're doing. They don't want to look stupid, right? It's just like
or just like just get better. Like we all know that we're not going to be a certain thing. Like I don't know about you guys. I'm never going to be able to dunk, but like, you know, I can improve my 3-pointers.
Get a trampoline. Get a trampoline. You'll be fine. Get a get some moon shoes. Get some moon shoes. Start leaping.
So one thing that when you guys end up playing on Live at the Bike, it'll happen. You'll see that the camera angles don't show everything. Like when you're there looking at the other guy, there's so many things going on there. You can sense energy that the camera just cannot pick up. And that's what I noticed, like when I was playing on there, or, you know, that's why I try to accommodate the audience when they're like, oh, this is so easy. Well, guess what? You see the fucking whole cards, you know, it's like, you know, even I try to like cover up the whole cards in my mind and be like, you know, and that's how I adjust my commentary or my understanding, you know, what's going on. So I'm just like, if somebody's move doesn't work out, it's like, well, I like the play because ABC XYZ, and like if you cover up the cards, like, hey, you try doing it covering up the cards, not fucking easy.
Right, and it's like, I guess the entire idea is like, even with commentary and things of that nature, it's very easy to get, I guess, addicted to using the whole cards as like a cop out of like things being good and things being bad, and it's apparent when there's commentators that understand the game for what it is and just realize, no, this is a great play. He ran into top of range. And obviously, like, chat's not going to understand that as much, just because most of the chat isn't super crushers as much as we want to believe they are. As much, like, newsflash. So it's like the commentators that understand the game and are probably successful in the game enough to do commentary on it understand the angles that the plays are coming from, and that's part of being good at commentary.
And that's also why like we have the commentators like play on the show, which is like so you understand what it's like, and just like, you know, it's like one of the patterns for commentators that don't play on the shows is like you could tell that, you know, they're just like in for self promotion or firing shots, and like you clearly don't know what these guys are going through. And that's a bit, I feel like, unfair to the players, in which they're the ones being vulnerable, like putting themselves out there.
Right. I remember I used to watch some of the Live at the Bike streams with Avoid the 9 to 5 and MJ, and like their commentary was amazing, because I remember Avoid the 9 to 5 really had a live centric approach where he was like looking for his physical tells, and then MJ was like had a repertoire with the players in the game, but also was a very high level player as well. So it's just like when you have something like that, it's very, very valuable to the viewer, and it just makes it easier to watch and the whole experience a lot better.
Yeah, I agree. And so one of the things is like, I think I didn't really understand when I was younger what a poker career was. And I was sitting there like judging TV players. Like one of the biggest breakthroughs, a couple of biggest breakthroughs. One, watching Prolid Friedman play. The other one is Gus Hansen. Like, you guys are probably too young. You guys were like infants. But when he was like crushing the WPT, like I was like, this guy plays like a fish. Like but he was like way ahead of the curve when it came to playing in position, like understanding position. Like he would just do things, and then I just like woke up one day. I'm like, oh my god, like what he's like raising with trash, he always has position. Or just like, you know, when he was like dealing with out of position, like he's thinking of like, you know, ranges. So he was ahead of his time, you know, when he was crushing the WPTs. Then we don't know what's going on now, but but like after 10 years, 15 years, 20 years or whatever, and I had this conversation with Helmuth too on the podcast. It's like, so one, good reputation as a poker player to good reputation in community, content creator, TV player, tournament scores and wins. That conglomerate is kind of like what a poker career is in like Pokemon terms. You kind of got to catch them as many as possible, and then like that's after you like kind of do what you can. It is what it is. You could go on forever. Just like there's also higher stakes in poker, or you could just like choose where you go. So just something for you guys to think about. You guys don't need to answer now, but maybe 5 years later, 10 years later, you guys think about how you guys.
I've thought about that a little bit with so I also play daily fantasy sports DFS, and like that's something that I've used to supplement poker as well, where I'm more of a specialist in one sport, which is NFL, and it's a good one to be because like a lot more recreationals play that sport as well. It's really popular. And it's just like it's something different but similar to poker along the lines of there's like a very technical aspect to it, but it's also really like judgment based on whether you're playing like a big field contest or a small field contest, and you get to know the players you're playing against if it's a small field, etc. And strategies differ like that. And it's just like it's similar to poker, right? It's along the same like lines in the industry. So it's like it's almost like you're doing poker, except it's daily fantasy sports. And then there's like other things like that too, where it's like you're branching out, but it's not really like that far. It's just like a similarity, and you're using like the same skill set from poker with just like a few adjustments, right?
Yeah, a little trivia is Dan Zach told Jesse Martin to stop wasting his time with daily fantasy, and Jesse Martin, I don't know if you guys saw, binged like $2 million in the thing. Like Jesse Martin, he just had a podcast on Card Player, and known him for like a long time, not like all the way back, but we crossed paths quite a bit, and still chat occasionally. But yeah, he like people want to see like the flashy, sexy careers. He has like a lot of the regs like respect career wise. Like he makes very good decisions the entire way, and to my knowledge hasn't really faltered, but a lot of his early career was very similar to mine, just in that era. Just we're just like, oh well, I can make X dollars an hour at poker, so even if I can't find a job, this is the worst that happens, which hopefully for you guys, hopefully you guys don't get in trouble. But as Landon mentioned in his blog, you guys hear about like punching your head against the wall and just getting beat down for like several buy-ins and having to regroup, and that just it doesn't end. You have to choose where how far you want to take it, and whether you can't take it anymore, like me. But yeah, it is like you don't know where your career is going to take, but you could be like, I could at least beat this level, I could at least do this, and that's something good to fall back on, because if taking a shot at some point doesn't work out, well, you could back up into.
Yeah, and I guess it's all just a matter of like it's just calculated risk of just understanding where your edge is, how much a spot's worth to you, right? Because if I'm playing in a certain game, at least shot taking 1K, and not trying to put myself in the best position to be able to do that by like game selecting as hard as I can and hoping to get decent seats, and if the game's not that good, kind of move on. And then it's okay to just take a break, chill out, go back to 500, and find another time to shot take. And that's part of becoming successful as well. Is it's not just how good you are, but the soft skills are what's going to effectively dictate your entire career. And it's just a matter of putting yourself in the best positions possible to succeed. And when you have a network, at least in poker, and you have people that do believe in what you're doing and believe in your talent and skill, it becomes a lot easier to kind of take your shot, so to speak. It becomes so much easier because you know that if something doesn't work, that's okay. You have people that are willing to help and support you and willing to either have you back on stake, because before I kind of went on my own in the very recent past, like it's probably been less than a week now, my coach and friend from the beginning basically said, look, you can keep making me 30% variance free money effectively because you're never leaving stake until you're out of makeup, or you could take your shot, see how it goes, and then if it doesn't work, just come back on stake, make back the money, and then try again. And I'm more than willing to put in the time necessary. And I'm really grateful to be able to have that opportunity and kind of have those connections, at least in the poker sphere.
So this is going to be on June 1st, 2020. Landon, you want to drop your mindset on your blog, and we'll have it in the chat. Hope you can.
Yeah,
couple more followers.
sure. So the reason why I write my blog is because I really like looking. Well, I know I'm going to enjoy looking back and reflecting on the things and the way I think about things now. And I've been told by a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of people who've either reached out through DMs. I keep my DMs open just to kind of see what's kind of floating. And I've been reached out to by a lot of people, and family and friends included, that are just like, yeah, like I really enjoy your posts, and I either they see versions of themselves in the stuff that I'm writing about, whether it be relationships with their friends in their lives or things of that nature, where I just kind of write it when I have something to think about, and I just kind of really want to express it and look back and see how that is going to change as I evolve and effectively grow up. Because even now, as like a 21-year-old, like I am nowhere near the life experience or have the effective wisdom to effectively teach or talk about anything except for the things that I effectively think I know. And I know that, and that's okay. Like I don't have to be the next poker coach / wizard to the public at any point in my career. Like I don't have to take that role if I don't have to. And I'm just kind of want to look back at some posts that I've made, maybe the next couple months, maybe in a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is, and look back and be like, oh, this is what happened when I first started shot taking 1K and out. This is how it felt, or this is how it felt when I lost my first 5K plus pot when I ran a pretty sick bluff and got snap called by the nuts. And that was my first blog post, so feel free to check that one out. That was kind of, yeah, I've talked a lot about that hand since. And either way, like it's all just like part of like the journey, right? It's all part of the stepping stones to evolving in this career and evolving in who I am as a person, and kind of looking back and seeing how I used to think about things then, and then continually kind of write about it and reflect on it. Because I could just keep it to myself, sure.
Yeah.
But I've been told by a lot of people how much they enjoy reading it, enjoy kind of some of the words resonate of certain things of, oh, like I see your passion for the game, and I see, like, thank you for writing that, because it's kind of giving me some sort of joy and kind of wanting to get back into poker. And I'm like, as great, like as much as it helps you, like I do it for myself, and if it helps other people, that's great. Like it's just a bonus at that point. And I just really enjoy writing it. Yeah, to an extent. I'm giving back where I can, at least now, because I thought that like I had a small stint of time this month where I thought I wanted to do more coaching work, and I realized that at this point in my career, that's not me yet. It's just not me. Like I don't have the time, and I'm still trying to make something of myself in poker, that I can't be juggling too many different things at once.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to something like that, where I got into poker for the freedom and being able to kind of wake up and have my schedule, to where I know that if I have blocked off a certain percentage of my time in a day, and like, oh, I can't just chill out because I have this coaching session to do it at 4 o'clock or whatever the time is, it just reminds me that like you're not effectively free to an extent. Like whether I chose to do the coaching or not, I did, but it's like that time is not blocked, and I'm not in a mindset to be like, you know what, like I'm willing to block off this time. That's okay. I'm just really selfish with my time, and
You should be.
I realized how much it was taking away when I was kind of burned out effectively from a day of like coaching and then streaming and then playing as well. Like I can't even play as much as I want to because I'm too busy. I'm too tired. I streamed for 10 hours. Like, and that's okay. Like I don't need to do everything at once. I can just enjoy the ride mostly, because I realized how quickly I'm trying to scale stakes and trying to get to 2K and L as fast as possible, and this, that, and the other. And it's great. Like I love pushing myself and trying to get better and improve. But if I'm not enjoying the process and enjoying the journey, then I'm going to watch it pass me by when I get to where I want to and be like, where'd all the time go? And that's not what I want to happen.
Right. I think a lot of people forget that, like, when they're grinding and they're so focused on winning in the monetary aspect. It's like, this is fun. Like, we're doing this. Like, the freedom is amazing. Like, we're so blessed to be able to play a card game for a living. Like, and in relation to your blog, it's like, we're a poker community, right? We're not just, obviously we're individuals trying to succeed on our own, but we're a community. Like, we want other people around us to succeed. Like, it feels good when people around us are doing well as well, and we can talk with them about it. We can experience similar things, which is why I think, like, a lot of the time, like, we have similar mindsets on things, Landon. We're like the same age. We've gone through a lot of similar things. We're like around the same skill level. Maybe, I don't know how, if you think it'll be. I think we
Heads
both
up
think
for roll. Heads up for rolls now. I'm just kidding.
Heads up for rolls.
heads up for rolls. Yeah. But I think that's like one of the things that it's always good to just keep in mind. Like, take a step back and like smell the roses, almost like enjoy the experience of what you're doing, and don't just like let the stress or maybe like wanting to achieve your goals so much detract from like the ride and the experience that you like having while you go through this.
It's so tough because it's again, like, it's another fine line you kind of have to worry about of like, when is it time to effectively shot take 1K and L for me, and then maybe I do just chill out and play and just take some time and play 500 and run up a roll for myself there, and then take a shot at 1K, because effectively it's a means to an effective end, where it's like, maybe I don't need to scale so fast. Like, maybe it's okay, because I know that even in my short career of poker, it's felt like I played poker for 10 years or whatever time I think it is, because it's all I do. Not in a bad way of it's all I do, but like, it's all I effectively want to do, whether it be like exercising and socializing and talking with friends, this, that, and the other. But when it comes to poker, I've put in countless hours these past 16, 17 months. And even still, like, I come back waking up in the morning thinking, when am I going to get to play poker today? And I get to choose when that is, with the beauty of online. Like, I've talked with Brad Wilson from Enhance Your Edge, shout out to Enhance Your Edge, and he's like a mentor figure to me now. And he's basically like saying, look, like, just take your shot. You're young. You have the ability to do that without having all the risk. And it's just really monumental to be able to have people in my corner that are looking out for my best interest while giving me the wisdom that they've had from their careers. And it's almost like I feel like there's not an obligation, but like, there's a lot of people that have helped me get to this point. I don't want to effectively like let them down. And like, I have a lot of, I guess, potential and talent in this game that I want to try to, like, they want to help me realize that potential, as well as I don't want to sort of fall by the wayside and do something else. At least not yet, because I still have a lot of stuff I want to prove to myself in poker, just for the competitive standpoint, not in trying to prove to anyone else that I am the best player in the game that there is, but just rather, I want to put in the work. I want to get to a certain point. I have a support system that helps me get there, and I'm super grateful, and I can't be thankful enough for the people that have helped me get this far. And it just, I write about it a lot in my blog posts as well. Like, if you want to like kind of think, I guess, see how I see these kind of things on mentorship and that ability, like, it's just.
Whoa, lost you.
It feels like there's a potential to not succeed if you spend all your time in certain aspects, but having the ability to sort of go out on your own and try some other things has just been great. And
Yeah.
I can't be thankful enough.
You guys are at the age for sure. Just like keep developing abilities. Like, I don't want to comment one way or another, but hopefully, with the college topic, hopefully you can quantify to your parents. It's like you're not throwing it away, or you're not just saying no. It's just like, right now it's time to develop certain skill sets, and maybe you have the network or opportunity in which it's not always going to be there. Like, in 5 years, you don't know what your network's going to be like. But now that you have these resources and these people, like, take advantage of it.
Yeah, like, I guess we can kind of talk about that, right? Like, how I guess Justin, I can kind of chime in on like how our parents kind of saw poker, I guess. In the, like, I guess I'll speak for myself first, where my parents weren't very happy at all about me sort of taking a break from college, especially with, I guess, the aptitude I do have for succeeding in school and other things. to where I just said like, look, like I'm going to take this time and I'm going to try for myself. This is what I want to do. And at first they were reluctant and said, hey, maybe find something that you can learn in college that will help with poker, like statistics or things of that nature.
Yeah.
But then again, like the only thing that's going to help you in poker is getting in the streets and playing for yourself and learning and studying and things of that nature. To where like you can learn and study game theory on a college course, sure, but then working with the solver is completely different.
Yeah.
Right. So I basically like I still remember like very, very recently, like I just started, I guess, getting to 500 NL online and having 5-figure months, which has been amazing. It's been great. And I finally got to a point where I'm like, yeah, I'm not making $500-$600 a month anymore and can barely pay rent. I'm now at a point where I can support my mom if she needs it, or have the money and the free time to do other things. Not even that I am going to do other things, but I have the ability to. And now they see poker as this great thing that they're like, yeah, like if there's anyone that can do it, like they'd bet on me every time, just because like they believe in my skill level and talent for other things, not even just poker, obviously, but just being generally smart, I guess. They're like, you can do anything you set your mind to, but then I realized I can't do everything I set my mind to, because it's just too much. So I just decided to go all in on poker, and now I'm at a point where the results on that are showing up to where they're like, I guess it worked out. And I remember like a couple months ago, I told my mom, I'm like, just trust me. Just trust me. I'm going to make things work out. And she was like, okay. Here we are now. And it's
Yeah,
still unimaginable to me.
I think the results are like an underrated aspect when you think about it yourself, because we always like understand that it's like the process, right? And then like the results will follow. But people who are outside the industry don't think about it that way. They're like, well, there's like a lot of risk in this, right? And like Wayne mentioned earlier, it's actually like not that much risk when you compare it to like things like going into like startups where there's like the rate of failure is even like higher and like the variance is like even more increased. But when you can like prove some results to your parents, I think that can, it sounded like it helped a lot for you, Landon, where it's like it helped a little bit for me where I had some big DFS scores like for tournaments, and then I was also like consistently winning at poker. And so I think my dad kind of got on board with it, but my mom was still, she wanted me to go to school because she thought that, well, like who knows what can happen here? Like you need the degree to fall back on. And it's like, I think it is a good fallback, right? Where if everything doesn't work out, like you would have that to fall back on. But at the same time, you're sacrificing what you have going for you right now with like, I have a very good network with me, like, and people to rely on. And also this is like the time when I have no one depending on me really. I can just go for it, right? And just try to succeed to the max. And it's like, if I go to school, they're like, well, you can play poker at the same time, but it's not how it works, right? You need to really focus a lot of your attention on like what you're trying to like achieve, what your goal is, and then just put in the hours. Like it's very hard to split your time, like Landon kind of mentioned earlier with when he was like talking about streaming and like coaching. That's within poker, right? It's like if you're at school, it's going to be even more difficult with like things you're focusing on there, and then they'll probably just go to the back burner because I'm much more interested in poker, daily fantasy sports, etc.
And I mean, this isn't to say like don't go to college, like focus on poker, like follow your dreams type of thing. That's not what this is.
Yeah.
It's just that before I was still in school while I was playing poker to an extent. I was playing micros and stuff, but I did have a very, very solid network and ability to be able to effectively have the coaching and have the sort of direction I needed while just being naturally, I guess, able to attempt something like this, as well as if it didn't succeed, find something else I could still do because I'm young and have the time. This isn't like if like you're older and go like shoot your shot, basically. Like it's not the same thing at all. It's just that hard, like Justin and I are lucky enough to effectively have the opportunity to make something of it, and we succeeded. And this is not like it's not an advocation of quit what you're doing, go all in on poker, because it's harder now than it ever will be.
Right. Don't look at us and say like these kids have done it, like I'm definitely gonna do it now. It's like you really need to be very confident in yourself, not just what other people have done, but knowing that you yourself can do it like within yourself. And if there's any doubt, like you really need to make sure, because like there's gonna be variance. Like there's gonna be stretches where it's like what's going on here? Like, I thought I was a winning player. Like, I thought I was gonna like be able to do this, and now I'm just like doubting myself. Where you really need to know that like this is what you want, or else it probably won't work out for you.
And like I tell the audience and some of the people I am involved with, like you just wait. You have to hit the 5 year mark after you're 21, and then the 10 year mark and the 15 year mark, and then along the way, just decide what direction you want to take in life. Because, like, hopefully, poker's not the only thing you do in your life, and there's a big anti-college movement where it's not worth the money. That is true, but at the same time, like monetary and financial wise, are you going to pay for that degree? But there's also a social aspect, and let's be honest, we're human beings. Like, there is like social bias and, like, higher society, lower society, and it's just like we don't have to act like that, but it is a defensive measure where it's just one less thing that people can attack you with, like that you didn't do something, or so just you guys keep that in mind. It's, I guess, the same thing, like not same thing, but similar, just like how nice of a car you drive or how nice of a house you have. It's just like it's just something you have to decide for yourself, like how far you want to go with these things. But there's definitely positives, but it's just not the positives that our parents' generation think, that it's like, oh, you have a degree, get a job. Guess what? Everyone has a degree. Like, the job, a lot of job applications say, yeah, we minimum have this, but it definitely does not get you in the door. It's just one of many qualifications. It's even apply, I guess.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's like the college degree has become the new like high school graduation, where it's like it's just like a prerequisite at this point. And then it's like, okay, like now what experience do you have, like, etc. It's just so there's like a cost benefit to everything. It really just depends on what you personally want. And I definitely agree with you about like almost a stigma of like saying where you didn't graduate college or like you dropped out, where it's like people are going to judge you for that. You have to be okay with that. Like you have to know that like what you think of yourself matters more than like what other people do. And it can be like hard. Like like you said about driving the car or whatever, like if you want to like virtue signal and buy, I know there's a lot of like stories about when poker players had early success, they would just buy an expensive car and just be like, yeah, look at me, like I did this.
You made it. Made it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that's a bad financial decision just because they were feeling like hate or like not accepted by people around them, because it's like they weren't conforming to like what other people were doing.
I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't that bad of a spender, but I definitely wasted a lot of money, and there definitely was something like a chip on your shoulder, like, like, hey, this is something you do too. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily like stupid. It's like it's part of a natural growing process. Same thing in high school, where you want, the coolest shit. Like it's just part of growing up. And then when you grow up, maybe you do want to keep up with the coolest shit, or maybe you don't. Maybe it's not important to you, but you got to try.
Yeah.
And just like, so like, you just have to decide. There is a stigma, like you go to a social setting and they're like, other people are going to be polite to you. They're going to be like, oh yeah, it's cool you followed, poker, and then you're going to have the same 20-minute conversation every single time, but why you justify your actions. It gets old even for yourself, in which you're just like, okay, why don't I just do as many minimums or as many blockers as possible. Blocker bet the term, but like that just takes care of that thing where it's just like, yeah, I finished the degree, I finished that, and just like, even though it's really hard for you guys to concentrate developing poker and going to school now, me, Maria Ho, Kitty, we all played poker when we were going through college when we finished, and it was fucking painful, but like I joke about the degree or in always shouting at the UC system, but it's just like it's just a blocker bet where you just like literally people can't approach you when things get heated, or sorry, when you have a conversation, things are okay in the beginning, you're polite, and then when discussions get heated, shots are gonna get fired, and the more defenses you don't have just leaves you vulnerable. And maybe you guys don't talk, maybe you guys like make up, but it's kind of like damage it's done. And that's kind of what's like waiting for you guys later in life, in which you're not going to get judged at when you're 21 having these qualities, but once you're like 30 or 40 or 50, that's reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really interesting because even like my friends that I had a friend of mine in college where we'd have effective arguments about how sustainable and real quitting college to pursue poker was effectively outlandish because very few people succeed because it's true. And then everyone thinks they're special enough to sort of make the jump and succeed in that environment. And I very well could have not to an extent because I knew that I was going to put in the work necessary to succeed. But it's tough because everyone that drops out and tries to do something, at least for the start of it, for the first couple months,
You
has
punch the
that fire to
face.
succeed. Yeah,
Yeah.
like they have that fire to succeed. Everyone thinks they can do it because if X can do it, like if I could do it, or if Justin can do it, why can't
Right.
you? Type of
Yeah.
idea, and it's it's painful. Like I remember being in college when I was broke, and I had the whole degen problem of betting on sports, and thankfully for me, it wasn't a lot of money, but I had to live with the conscience of someone else being family members having to pay my debts and I had to pay them back and live with that mentality of you went busto, you didn't even go busto, you went negative busto and you had to effectively pay back your brother. For me in my case with my brother. And that's kind of allowed me to not take the degen role of why I got staked for my entire career was because I don't want to be in that position again where other people's rock bottoms might be a little bit different. Where maybe they bust a roll and that's okay. And then they do it a couple more times and they're like, that's it, I can't fucking take it anymore. And they don't want to play poker. Because everyone burns out differently.
Yeah.
My burnout might be different than someone else's, where someone else just stops playing poker. Or some people's burnout is they keep trying to take a one buy-in shot every time they have money and try to succeed. And that's kind of the
That's too real,
tragic
man. Too
story.
real.
Yeah, and
Just kidding.
it's kind of like the tragic story of gambling where like there are certain people, like the small percentage that do get shown as the super winners and the graphs with the upward slopes. And then there's other people that think that they can do it because they see like some 21-year-old kid that posts a bunch of stuff can do it themselves. So why can't they? And it's it's always tough to think about because like the gamblers are going to still gamble. Like I'm like the graphs aren't going to be the impetus that pushes them over the edge. But then again, like there is something about like potentially like effectively selling a dream that isn't effectively real for the vast majority of the population. And that's an entirely different topic and story, but it's just something I think about all the time of like how open do I really want to be because I don't go do it from a place of like I'm trying to incite other people to do it as well. More of
Yeah.
just like I love poker, I love the game, I'm trying to grow it, and I'm just trying to take whoever's watching or want to be a part of the journey
Be
on
a
that journey
reference.
and
Yeah.
be as transparent as possible.
Yeah.
But I'm nowhere near advocating, say, quit your job, quit your lifestyle to focus on poker because anyone that's younger has less to risk. If you have a family and things of that nature,
Can't do
it's
it.
an entirely different ballgame.
Yeah.
Because if I lose like my 5 buy-in shot, which is like 5K, I have to deal with that myself, and I'm mentally prepared for that. But if I had a kid, right, I can't mentally prepare him and say, hey, like I might lose $5,000 today, like I might lose effective like other things, and it's a lot of weights to bear. And being young, there's not much weight on my shoulders except for my own.
Right. Yeah. Talking about that more, it's just you have to be really aware of what your expenses are and what your like monthly nut is. If you guys know that term, like your upkeep per month, where it's like you have to be really almost frugal at the beginning because the money you have is like if you have a poker roll and a life roll separate, I think that's good because then you can just like really focus on like growing your poker roll. And if you guys know about like investment models at all, it's like it's very important to make sure that you're not losing huge, but if you lose small like or like medium, it's fine. And then like as long as you don't lose huge because it gives you the opportunity when a game is really good or when there's like something that you want to shot take or et cetera to like try to move up. Like moving up can be very, very beneficial because it allows you to make more money, right? Where it's like it's very hard to beat rake at lower stakes. Like it just that's how it is. There's gonna be a lot more money going there out of the percentage of the pot. So as you move up, it allows you to actually essentially like make a better living and get more money, and then you can branch out and like start paying for like things that you might want that aren't related to poker. So I think it's like it's very balanced where you have to know and have discipline about what you're going to be spending your money on and how you're going to like manage your life in a sense. Like being a poker player, it's like there's your job, but it's also your life, kind of, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of the successful poker players that lasted did end up getting their degree. Like I forgot, like Gary Adelstein, Kelly Minkin both went to the University of Arizona. You know, Andy has his degree. Like a lot of people from UC San Diego, UC Santa Barbara, UCLA, we forced ourselves to finish, and it's just like we may never use it in a job application, but like it's just like one less thing that you know I'm gonna fire shots if I keep going. But yeah, just if people want to attack you for certain things, it's just one less thing that can hit you with.
Yeah, and then I guess like there's another part of it is like doing things for yourself versus other people. In college, for me, at least when I was in my second year before I took a hiatus, which will effectively be for a long, long time. Potentially, maybe who knows? Maybe I do something. Maybe I go back. Not entirely sure yet. You never know. But it was more like I told my mom, like, look, I know how much you want me to do this, but I don't want to put myself through this pain anymore. Because I went through a lot of pain thinking that I had to wake up every day for schooling, just because it was something that I didn't see mapping out regardless, and I just wanted to spend my entire time playing poker. And for some people, like their family situation might not be the same, where like their
Yeah.
parents might not be as accepting and being like, okay, like I see your point here, and they're like, no, like you can't come back home until you get your degree. Like I understand that part of it as well. I was just fortunate enough as well just to be able to kind of be like, look, and effectively use my reasoning and how I see fit of I need to take a break. I need to see where this can map out to because I think I can do great things here. And I was given that freedom, and my mom allowed me to stay at the house for 6 months after college for the semester to effectively be rent free because she was like, you did very well in high school, and I got the IB diploma, which is effectively like pretty decent deal. And she was like, you worked very hard in school. I'll give you 6 months, and then if you want to go back or not, we'll figure that out. And I'm assuming she very well thought I was going to go back, and I still wasn't even posting that great of results, and I was still making like a couple $100 a month, like 5, 6, 7, 8, things like that. Where like obviously you can't sustain yourself for a career,
Yeah.
but I knew how fast poker scaled. I was like, look, just give me some time. I'm figuring things out now, and I guarantee you, like this year of 2020, I was like, this is going to be one of the biggest years I've ever had. And right now, it's miles ahead of where I thought I would be. And even for the sense of like just living expenses and things of that nature, I didn't think it would come this fast. But that's part of having a network and part of spending your time and improving. And now she's like, thank you for leaving, to an extent of like I wanted you to be here, but I see how much you love it and doing great things, and she can't be more supportive.
Shout out to moms.
Shout out to
Justin?
moms.
The moms.
Shout out.
No, yeah, I had a similar experience as well, where it's just like I wasn't enjoying like going to school, and I didn't see where the future was in it for me personally. So I just decided that it just like wasn't going to be something that I wanted to focus on, and it was very difficult to convince my mom specifically, but she let me try it, which is like very big kudos to her. Like I really appreciate it, and like I had already shown results that were good, so I think that's like a main thing if you're trying to prove to them, like try to show some results at least, or try to explain to them like how it works, because a lot of times they're not understanding where you're coming from, because we know about the variance and we know about how like they're thinking in terms of like raw amount of money a lot of time, when like you might have like a very large win rate at a lower stake, and it's like, well, if I translated this to like a higher stake, even if it got cut in half, like I would be making X amount of money, etc. They just want you to be happy, right? They just want you to like succeed. And if it clashes with what they for you, to like make them understand why it's actually best for you.
Yeah, I mean, I always like bridging generations too, and obviously Joey does a good job of this. Just like I've had good chats with people like Barry Greenstein, Esfandiari, and Locke, and like I had a podcast with Phil Hellmuth, and there's a bunch of people I haven't even mentioned that I can't think of at the top of my head. But like part of part of like bridging just like all of humanity in general, or just like talking with different generations, asking them what's it like now, because like I know what it was like back then, and you know it was just different. And hopefully, you know, you guys are good kids, and I say kids like 21, but just like
I still think I'm like 6. Honestly, I still think I'm
yeah.
like 6. But
Yeah,
go
it
on.
was. It just some of the pitfalls that may happen, even if they don't happen to you, they may happen to your network. Where just like, you know, mentally prepare yourself for some challenges about real life that you know, you just have to deal with and have to fight out of. And just like I hit my first losing year 11. Zach Freeman hit like year 9. I think Lyman hit like year 2 or 3 off like variance. You know, there's no way Lyman wasn't a winning player year 2 or 3. But if you're dealt the losing hands, guess what? You can't win.
Yeah.
So that was like a big slap to reality, where like some people are like, oh, if you do everything right, you're gonna win. And it's not necessarily true. Like if you're dealt losers, you're gonna fucking lose. You know.
Yeah,
So
and I guess like that's another thing about poker itself, right? Is like that gambling world is so foreign to the common, the layman, so to speak, right?
yeah,
Where
yeah.
like my parents are like effectively like whether they've done gambling themselves is a different story, but like still like get like in the poker world like fish of just like not understanding how the poker world works, because they're not. Why would they know how poker works, right? Like they only know like they're from their experiences and knowing that a lot of people fail. So it's probably likely that that's going to be the same thing that happens to me, who is their son. So it's like
They mean well.
they do, and that's the thing is like they mean well, but they don't effectively know what's best for me in this sort of path, just because they don't have that wisdom of going through it. And the people I've talked to and the mentors I have now are just absolutely monumental to kind of keeping me in check. And I can't be more grateful for them for that.
Part of it too is just like you know, when you see something like brain surgery. Actually, my childhood best friend, undergrad Stanford, Harvard Med School, and is a brain surgeon at Kaiser. It's just like when you hear that, the average person's be like, I can't do that, or they look at a brain like, I don't know what to do with that. But with cards, it's just like it's different, and just like, you know, I don't remember who said it. It's like as a joke, they're like they were commenting on brain surgery or something, like they see, just say they see, you know, Garrett play a hand amazing, and they're like, oh, I could do that.
Right.
I'm like,
Like
oh
I could do
yeah,
that, right.
yeah. I'm like, oh, I watched a couple episodes of ER, I could do brain surgery. You know, it's like it's really ridiculous. Like they don't know how much, I don't even know how much work he's put in, but I know what directions he went. And there's I'm gonna, yeah, I'm not gonna say which TV player I talked to, OG TV player, but basically like he and I have a higher appreciation of certain TV plays that when you're more experienced, you will, and you know, gone through the journey, you're like, oh man, that's crazy. There's this I don't know what show it is. I think it's High Stakes Poker, where Esfandiari has like Ace 8 with Ace of Hearts on the button, and Johnny Chan has Jack 9 of Diamonds in the big blind. Do you guys know this hand?
I'll have to look back at it.
I don't
But
remember.
for for the nature, yeah. Proceed.
In my opinion, this is the most beautiful hand in televised poker, but to the public's eye, they don't have the appreciation, and I'm pretty sure you guys have the appreciation of what went down this hand and why it's, like, in my opinion, the most beautiful hand in televised poker. So folded to the button, Esfandiari is like, here's Johnny, and he raises Ace 8 off Ace of Hearts. Johnny Chan's in the big blind, and he calls with Jack 9 of Diamonds. Flops like, I think Deuce Deuce 3, like 2 hearts. And then Esfandiari's speech play through the entire way was just like how he was able to, I think, goad Johnny Chan into doing certain things, and how he was able to hand read was very masterfully done. And the subtext behind the hand is Doyle and Huckseed were like, wow. Or Doyle said, Antonio, don't ever talk to me in a hand. And Huckseed said, wow, that was masterfully done. And JRB was like, huh, what? So just the appreciation and just like the observation of that hand, just like after you become a more experienced poker player, you're like, holy fuck, like literally there's 50 things going on there that you can't even explain to somebody who hasn't gone through the journey or hasn't studied certain things. And in a sense, like, I don't think what I could do what Esfandari did, or like a lot of things Garrett does, but I have an appreciation for it because I've tried it myself. Probably like, you know, a casual basketball player, when they see like, you know, LeBron, Kobe, rest in peace Kobe, or Jordan, they're like, oh my God, you know, they have an appreciation of how much more difficult what they do is compared to, you know, where I'm just like, oh cool, he dumped.
Yeah, right. Like just like the hand like Vanessa Self 6-bet jam, Jack 7 of diamonds. Like that to me is like one of like the sickest hands ever. I'm just like, not even like, oh, like that's like a punt. I'm like, someone like she had the ability to like and the foresight of knowing what was going on and still making the play on the recorded television screen is absolutely like mind blowing to me. It's insane. And like I just appreciate, yeah, you just gotta have aces. You just fucking have it. Like game's so easy. And it was just one of the greatest things that I've seen. And I'm assuming, I think there was something that somebody said like, oh, like if someone can do that, like they're gonna be successful in poker, and she was. And like if she could succeed in poker now, probably for sure. And it's just about like having like that idea and like of aggression and understanding what's going on. To where if someone doesn't know poker, they're like, why did they go all in for 6 figures with Jack 7 of diamonds? But then like, when you think about it, if you know you're only getting called by aces, then I mean, it's a different story.
Right, yeah, there's this whole subtext of poker where it looks very replicable, right? Where it's like, oh well, they did this, and then you see the cards, and it's like, oh, that was so good, like they knew, or like that was so bad, like there's no way I would ever do that. But it's just like you're watching after the fact with the cards up. It's like there's this whole subtext in meta that's happening within the game. There's the whole leveling aspect of like what's going on. I don't specifically remember that Esfandari had, but I do remember one where he had like.
It's not very popular. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I remember one where he had like 10-3 offsuit versus Phil Locke, and he got him to fold like an overpair, like on the flop, and it was just like, it was so sick. Like not just your technical aspect of the game, but like what you can do with like what you said, speech play, and like understanding your opponents. It's just there's like another level to it, like by far.
Like the people that are in the industry are the ones that understand and appreciate things the most from the industry, because they've just been around it. And anyone that kind of sees poker and thinks that poker is a thing of gambling, it's like, oh, like that guy's probably not lucky. Like that guy just got lucky. Like it's gambling. Like his win rate can't be that big. And they don't even think about win rate. They think that everyone loses. Like, oh, like the house always wins. And like rake is still going to be a thing and a factor, but it doesn't mean, and as clearly seen, like people can still have monstrous win rates and be very successful at poker, even though they're paying rake every single hand they play.
I used to be very, very defensive about the topic, and like I said, I had responses where I'm just like overcompensating, like buying extra things. Like I said, I'm not that big of a spender, even when I was like doing super well. But you know, they're like, we're human, and I kind of stopped doing that. And Liv Borey has a good TED talk or an Oxford talk of trying to, you know, put poker in the community. You know, obviously Joe Ingram's podcast, you know, Andrew Nimi Brado and Johnny Vibes # high quality vlogs. It's bringing this experience, you know, to a more layman's term and like human experience. That's where, like, you know, unfortunately for, say, poker and business, like you want to hide all your best secrets and you don't necessarily want to be known.
Yep.
Like the average human being needs, in order to validate something, they need to hear it in a way that they can process, rather than, you know, what you know and why you know you're ahead of the curve. And that's
that speaks to like just the fact that people are looking for what they are looking for, like in relation to them, where it's like these vlogs, like, I mean, they're high quality in the fact of like how they're formatted and how they're but it's like they're showing, a lot of them are showing hands, and it's just like just hands they played, and it's like hands that you could play as well in your own casino. And like I know Doug Polk was not into that. It's just like he thought it was very repetitive, and it wasn't like the high strategy that he was like wanting to talk about. But a lot of people are into that. Like we're very interested. That's shown by like the hundreds of thousands of views like Brad Owens getting on his videos. Just like people are really interested, want to like relate to you and what you're doing like in the poker world.
Yeah, that's part of just being a human, right? Like that's part of the whole human experience of sure, you can be great at poker, but if you're not relatable to the human and like the audience you're trying to get to effectively watch your content as a content creator, you're going to have consumers. If the consumers aren't interested in who you are and your journey, it doesn't matter how good the strategy is if you're trying to do strategy content, because they're not going to watch it. And that's an entirely different sort of idea of like, just because you're the best, if you're not good at the soft skills of marketing and branding and creating something and having people be interested in your trials and tribulations, so to speak, no, it's the word isn't going to get out there to an extent.
I was at
Like,
the yeah, go. Sorry.
oh yeah, like regardless of the ability and skill, there will obviously be people that are drawn to it, but you're not maximizing your potential viewership. And
Yeah.
you got to have it all of just being relatable, being good enough to effectively have people think, okay, like the strategy here makes sense, and it does based on whatever logic and reasoning you want to use. And that's an entirely different skill set and ability. And it seems to go away for like go on the wayside basically from just being a poker player itself if you're trying to get into content.
I was at Gardens and there was a high stakes mixed game, and I just like walked in the room, shout out to Smash David Baker, and then one of the high stakes players was just like he was just like, what is it with these like vlogs? What's going on? Like why are they so popular? Because he, like Doug Polk, was like, I'm into the competition, winning more, blah blah blah. And I was like, a possible explanation is like your beloved teacher, like your beloved college professor, like you have a personal attachment to this person because he or she like led you into a world that you're interested in but you didn't know about and bring you on a journey. But this college professor, say, I don't know, business or tech, they're not Bill Gates, they're not Elon Musk, they're not Steve Jobs, but you still appreciate and you still want to see what's going on. And that's where you are in your journey. Like 10 years ago, we were looking at poker differently. 15 years ago, we were looking at poker differently. We're in different learning spots or in learning phases or interest phases. So that particular portrayal and contribution just happens to hit these certain things. And he, I think, begrudgingly accepted my explanation, but still was salty. But this is a weird thing too, because it's like the guy, I'm sure, is way better than me in mixed games. And it's like he wanted it's that dichotomy of like he probably wanted to be recognized as a super pro, which I'm sure he is. But like he was kind of upset that, Andrew Nemi, Brad Owen get this like acknowledgement, recognition that he feels like he would deserve, but he doesn't want. And, so I don't know. He doesn't want because it blows his cover. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just about like who puts themselves out there as someone that is relatable to the audience and vulnerable enough to effectively show the highs and lows of what they're going through. And it, like, authenticity, like, kind of relates in a very, very good way, because everyone, like, it's almost like rare these days for people to just kind of like be transparent and be open about things, because everyone knows about their friends that are gambling and playing poker that go on a sick upswing or like post all the graphs or the chips when they're winning heaps. Like everyone has friends that do that, but then you don't hear from them for a couple months of like, oh, like what's going on? Well, I mean, I've just been running that. Like, while it's true or not, if all you're posting is the stuff that like things are going well,
yeah,
the audience only gets to see one side of you.
Shout out to social media. I'm just kidding.
Social media, yeah. I mean, social media is
one of the issues too is like getting clicks. Like honestly, being sincere doesn't necessarily get views. Like I think Joey he's found his groove, and he's been at it for like over a decade. Like so he's found the groove where he is authentic and he's getting the clicks. I remember a Doug Polk video where he was talking about his journey, and then he's playing against Canu and Sauce, and like that was one of the most authentic videos I've seen from Doug regarding a strategy perspective, but it didn't get as many views as some of his poker hands. So
And I think that's because people want the easy way of
yeah,
poker hands and poker strategy. They're like, oh, this is interesting. What happened in this hand? How can I replicate? But then like when you take like a deeper, in-depth look at specific things, like that video he probably talked about with Sauce and Kanu,
yeah,
it's a completely different thing. Just because at that point you're trying to understand the strategy as a whole versus like, oh, like how do you maximize EV in this hand, right? How does this hand get played the best way to where I can replicate this against my friends, where they want to replicate the moment rather than the holistic strategy. And then that's why those videos do really well, is because it's individual hands. So be like, oh, like I can take something from this hand and then try to use it in my own game versus thinking of a strategy as a whole.
I think that's part of it, but I also think it's they want to compare themselves to what's happening and say like they would have made the right
yeah,
decision. Where it's like
Yeah,
they,
that too, for sure. Yeah.
I would have done what's right here. Like, wow, this person messed up. And then Doug was also a very strong personality in what he believes in, which I think is very good. But it's also created some conflict with some very well-known people, and people like that type of drama, right? Where it's like it's very human centric, kind of where we're like, well, this is happening between these two big names. Like, I wonder what's going to be said next, et cetera, et cetera. Where it's like it might not be the most like healthy thing, but it's very, very interesting and generates a lot of buzz, right? Where it's like people really like to see people who have success get torn down or get attacked and or have big success, right? Where if you're succeeding at something like a lot and you have like a big score, like you win a big pot, it's like that's very interesting as well because it's like the most like the highest spectrum of like what is happening where it's not just like a raise, like bet flop, they fold, like etc. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. I mean, I think he's definitely been snubbed for certain things, but I do understand like his portrayal of certain things may not be like publicly accepted. But some of a lot of the points he brought out, like whether you choose to agree with him 100% or 70%, they are valid things, and they're like issues that if you Google them, his videos are probably the best, most comprehensive takes on them, and that's something that I think the poker world lacked. And I tell him all the time, like, yeah, I mean, even though you got snubbed for these things, I value what he did to the poker community, and hopefully 10 years from now, 20 years from now, these videos still exist, and if people want to look up certain issues or mythbusters and certain things, then it exists.
Yeah, I mean, he kept it real. He kept it real. He kept it real to himself.
I absolutely agree. It's like it's very hard in the poker industry because you're playing with these people. You're like trying to get into games. You're like trying to have good relationships where it's like you want to be maybe like have sponsorship from a site, or you don't want to like mess with the people who have like a lot of influence. But it's like Doug put himself out there and he spoke what he thought, and it was all based in fact, really. And he was very open and honest about like where things came from. Like I know he had that dispute with Jay Nandez where like things happened and etc. Like there was this dispute with like Ben 86. Like there's the whole Daniel Legrand and everything. The one thing you can't say about Doug is that he's not honest. Like Doug is very, very straightforward to his audience, and I think that's like extremely, extremely valuable, especially when it's on controversial subjects that a lot of people don't want to talk about, or they want to talk about only behind the scenes. Where it's like we're almost seeing like a little bit of that now, where like Bill Perkins just came out with the news about Jungle Man, where it's like a lot of people would not come out with something like that because like they don't think that something will get settled behind the scene. They think it'll get settled easier behind the scenes, where like they don't want to come out and talk to the community about it. And then if that's the way it goes, like it won't motivate real change, right?
And even that's a super, super touchy subject too, because like like the whole ghosting idea, like you can get into this for a long time, but like he's the only, like, because he got outed, right? Everyone like wants to gang up and attack him, and then they want to make the argument of like just because other people's done it doesn't make it right. And I'm sure he knows that and understands that. But like as a pro, like if you get the opportunity to have like effectively like a once in a lifetime thing of getting into a game where you would never get into otherwise, like it's just a really tough thing. It's really
Life
tough,
choices.
and obviously it's easy to say, oh, like no, like I can't. It's unethical and immoral and this, that, and the other. But then like that's the state of online poker now, and not just in the private apps and the games, but like even online now with RTA and things of that nature, where people could just be using a bunch of different things all at the same time. And basically, like, what people were shooting in like the Wild Wild West, now everybody has like advanced tech ARs, and you basically just everyone's bringing their technology to the table and the things that they have, and trying to do what's best to an extent. And then there's still a few people that are doing everything on like the straight and narrow. It's just a matter of how much of an ethical, moral dilemma you want to give your own self in, and how that affects your win rate. And it goes a lot more than that, but that's an entirely different topic and things on that nature. But it's
So you guys
really
didn't comment
it's
on
really
it.
tough.
Yeah. What do you guys think about the whole Bill Perkins Jungleman thing?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting situation because of how Bill Perkins like approached setting it up, where he was like, "Wow, this is going to be bigger than the whole Mike Postle thing," and like, "I can't believe this happened," and people's expectations got like really high. Where I think if he doesn't do that and just says like something about how like one of the top pros in the world was put themselves in a situation where like it wasn't like a completely like moral like thing for them in the right, then it would have been received differently. Because I know like a lot of people have been attacking Bill about it, where it's like, oh, so many people do this, like doesn't really like it's an accepted thing. Like, no way, it's bigger than Postle. Like they turn that into like a joke. But it's like, if we really focus down to it, like it's not something that should be done, even though like other people are doing it, right? We want to make it a fair community. We want to make fair play like the thing at the forefront. I know Jungleman posted about it where he's like, yeah, I know other people in that game were ghosting as well, but it's still not right of me to do, so we apologize, which is like I think the right thing to do. But I think a lot of people really just missed the point because they were expecting more drama than it actually was.
Yeah, I think people are just really bored as well, and they want something to sort of fuss over. And this is the next big thing, I guess. And you can't stick one guy over an open fire and say, yeah, he's the bad guy, when there's other people that are just waiting in the weeds, hoping that their name doesn't get brought up. Because he's not like, this isn't the first time it's happened or the first time it's ever going to happen. It's just who got caught first, and now who's getting their reputation, I guess, thrown asunder. And it's not fair, and life isn't fair and works in that way. But to like relentlessly attack someone that understands he did make a mistake, but was also offered like a pretty almost like can't turn down sort of opportunity, you can't really just say like, oh, like this guy's awful, like everybody hates Jungleman now, right? Like it's really not unfair, like there's not a good word for it, but like having one guy be the quote unquote pariah of this entire operation of ghosting is completely unfair in its own right. And I'm not saying that it's okay, but it's just that you can't take one guy and have him take the fall for the entire situation. Right. It's just not. It's not right. Yes, I don't know the right word.
Yeah, no. I on a similar light, it was just like we're live at the bike. You know, me, JJ De La Garza, and the live at the bike commentators. We're on broadcast, so we can't like lie about what's going on. But there have been people on the show, their whole cards are seen, and then whether on camera or off camera, they don't tell the story fully of what happened, just like off the cards perspective. And I know of like, you know, pros that like, you know, when they retell the story, or just average players, they tell the story of what happened. I'm like, I was there. It didn't happen like that, you know? So, yeah. Like it happens all the time, and especially in a environment where it's a game where we could see the physical cards, and that's supposed to bind us to a certain truth, like the rules of the game and the cards supposed to bind us to a truth. And then when people retell these things, like, you know, it goes all right, like all the time. So I accept that at least the people on Live at the Bike need to uphold a higher standard, but just like very low expectations for, you know, I guess everybody else, because I just seen minor infractions, and who knows what major infractions are going on.
Yeah, it's just you never really know the full story and to the full extent of what's actually happening, because there's always going to be details missing. And like basically saying, oh, like everyone hate this guy now for the actions that he took, it's effectively uncalled for. Because I've talked to a lot of other people about it, and they've said effectively to some extent the same thing of like, yeah, if a recreational player asked me to play 50-100 versus other recreational players and give a certain percentage, like how can a pro effectively, like, not in the sense like not turn it down, but that's just a very, very massive offer because the win rate and the ability in that game is insane. And it doesn't make it right, but it's just also a human nature as well of just knowing that there is an opportunity here and you still kind of want to make the most of it, especially when like the high stakes scene itself is kind of just dying around them anyways. Because it's a different story if there's like 100, 200 and games like that still running, at least in a public setting. But when everything in the private games it's all blocked off, it becomes very difficult to effectively have action or even get a whiff of being in those games when you're a top level pro.
Right, you can almost justify it where it's like, well, they're not letting me into this game, and it's like, well, why shouldn't I get an opportunity to play in this game? Like, if someone's going to give me that opportunity, I don't think it's that bad. And like, obviously, the issue is you're misrepresenting yourself as someone else where they don't have the skill that you do, so it's unfair to them, the people you're playing against. But you can justify it if you want to yourself, where it's like, well, they're not letting me in this game, so like, what else am I supposed to do? Where it's obviously not an easy situation, but I think.
Part of the equation, and this is why, like, I guess a lot of people, yeah, I mean, it's life choices, and people sometimes ascend to higher places, making these decisions, or get caught or don't get caught. Like, I don't know the answer. And I was with the Negroni Bill Perkins podcast and Terrence Chiang, they were mentioning too. In live poker, it's supposed to be one player per hand. Obviously, it's a soft enforcement, and then when it goes wrong, the format goes over. Don't do it again, you know. But in the terms of service, I guess on the major sites, it does not specify there's one player per hand. And like I never really thought about it. I'm like,
it seems kind of like straightforward, right? Like it should like.
Yeah, no, I saw something about that on Twitter too. It's like they're not specifying that, so it's like, well, what's wrong with it? Well, it's like, well, they're also not specifying some other things like that they may not have thought of. It's like really it comes down to what you think like from a moral perspective, and it's like you don't want to try to like take advantage. Well, maybe some people do want to try to take advantage of these people, but I don't think you should want to try to take advantage of these people and just try to make the environment as fair for everyone as possible. I think would be the best way to look at it, just even if it's not written in the terms of service, right?
Yeah, and we could throw sticks and stones at people, but like just like in the business and personal world, that's why there's like lawsuits or disputes or whatever. Just like it all of a sudden hits the boundaries of like what's legal, what isn't legal, what's moral, what isn't moral. And, you know, we don't know. It's easy to throw sticks and stones. Sorry, Landon, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot more difficult than what it seems. As in, oh, like this guy did something wrong, everyone attack. Because the problem, even with the games I play now online, like you never know if people are using RTA. And you're never gonna effectively know what's really going on. And just because somebody gets called out for it, they become now like the person. Like I've seen all the jokes already. It's like, oh, like oh, like there's someone here. Like, oh, like should I get Jungle to play for me? Like type of thing. Like, right. And that's that. It's a reputation. It's a reputation. Like it tanks the reputation because like if someone else got called out for it. And no one knew that Jungle did it or even confessed to it morally and outright, and like made the moral decision of saying, "Okay, I made a mistake here. Let me admit this." Then somebody else would take the blame for it as well, because as Bill said, there were other people doing it, but Jungle was like one of the first to confess about it. So now, and then Dan kind of tweeted what he tweeted, and now it's all out there to where it doesn't matter if there's a second or third or fourth person. Jungle is always going to be patient zero of the whole ghosting thing. And it's completely unfair in that regard. Like it's not, and that's kind of my sort of pain on it because like I can feel like myself like being upset like saying like, oh yeah, because he was the first one that got caught. Now he's public enemy number one, and it's just uncalled for. And
it's real, real life.
And even so, like there's other people that have done it, and no one's ever gonna find out, and no one's ever gonna know, and they're gonna be the most effectively ethical people in the community or part of the brigade of the people that keep poker fair, right? But you'll never know if they've done something in their past or future, and to what extent does it really matter, right? Like, what if somebody did it in the past and no one's ever gonna talk about it, but they themselves know that they did it, and isn't that the same sort of idea of it doesn't matter where you are, you still made an ethical mistake? Why is it more important if someone's a top pro versus someone that nobody knows? right? And that's just about the media and the branding of all of the entire situation. And it's like really, it's like disappointing because it's effectively unfair, and that's life, I guess. Because like we can't just push the rewind button, right? We can't do the hit rewind and find someone else that wasn't jungle, and then everyone else attacks them now. That's not how it works. This is the part of the sim, right? This is our sim.
In the whole situation, there are like a pretty decent amount of people defending jungle, like not saying that what he did was right, but just saying that like since so many other people were doing it and it's like a common thing in the online scene, like I don't think he's getting blasted too hard. A lot of people are actually coming at Bill, which I thought was pretty weird, just because of what he said about like coming out. They thought he was coming out about it to try to like get money back or something, and they thought he was coming out about it just like to try to benefit himself only. And it's just a very messy situation with like a lot of moving parts where only like some people know like everything completely that was going on. But the community, like you said, Landon, we want things to like talk about right now, especially during like COVID. And it is like something that everyone can have an opinion on, right? Where it's like maybe how you think about the person is going to influence what you're thinking, right? Where it's like if you like jungle already, you're like, oh, whatever, it wasn't that bad. Or if you didn't like jungle, you're like, oh, jungle's like a terrible person now, right? So it's like it's a slippery slope with our biases as humans, and we have to like try to be careful not to like completely ruin someone's reputation over something that wasn't like that is happening and wasn't as big a deal as something that's like a blatant angle shoot or something like that, right?
And like I guess the way I see it is that regardless of, because the people that are defending jungle are effectively known in the community as and high stakes, whatever game they're playing, like pros, and they're known and all that kind of stuff. But the problem is if recreational players just see the headline of the story, which is jungle man ghosting, now they think, okay, this guy's unethical as fuck, without really looking at the entire picture. And that's like not going to ever change because that's what happened. And it's really tough because it's not the way it should be. I mean, I don't know the solution to it, but I just know that
I think that's where like it becomes murky about like when we should out people for certain things. And like this happens a lot with like debts that people are in, where it's like, well, if we out them, like they're not going to pay it back, so we like outed and besmirched their reputation already. But it's like if you're not outing them, they can go and scam other people potentially, where it's like it's just a very hard thing to know about, like when you should try to put someone out there to the community to have their reputation be potentially damaged irreversibly or under scrutiny.
Yeah, I mean, there's no like I don't know the solution or the answer to all these sort of like ethical, moral problems, dilemmas, this, that, and the other, because it's like it's a really murky area because like someone's reputation does get like, yes, they made a mistake and did effectively like scam someone, this, that, and the other. But I think like the best way to go about it is to try to rectify that in the way that the people that have been hit with the impunity feel that they've been reciprocated, right? Like the people that got effectively scammed into an extent figure out with the perpetrator how to figure that out between them. But then again, there's people that will never get caught for doing what they're doing. So then it's just a really gray area, and there's no discussion that can be had that absolves people from the mistake they've made as well as rectifies them in the same token. And it's just tough.
It's real life.
That's why I stay inside and play poker all day. I don't have to deal with this real life stuff.
Yeah, but then when you get older, you're like, it comes to the point where like, damn it, I kind of have to deal with the real world as much as I can.
Yeah, I'll be a life fish. I'll be a life fish.
Like people ask me, like coming back to live with the bike, am I gonna, be there or propping at the bike? I'm like, because of my position, and while I'm not even close to the biggest name in poker, I feel like I have a moral obligation to be on the front lines and like try to do what I can. And I'm gonna make mistakes. I already know because we've already discussed things, and I guarantee the public's not all gonna agree. But we're doing what we can. It's easy to tweet 160 characters. It's not easy to run an operation.
Yeah, so, and I mean, it's just a matter of like trying to do as much as you can because we're all human and we're all flawed. It's just about making the mistakes and accepting that we are going to make mistakes and try to rectify those as quickly and efficiently as effectively possible. Because like, it's kind of the way I saw the mistakes I made with friendships, and when I would effectively siphon value from them and then kind of like chuck them to the wayside. And I know that what I did was wrong, and I understand that now. And I realized that that's not the way I want to act and the way I want to be, where it doesn't seem like if you either meet me or realize that like that's not what you'll see in a character flaw or trait, but it's something that I have to personally work on in my development, and we're all just sort of working towards our own ends, basically. And
It's also like practical applications. Like, yeah, we could have everybody in Live of the Bike wear a hazmat suit. It's just not practical. It's like just at some point, like things have to go. Things have to move forward. One of the
yeah,
things that I didn't necessarily publicize, like, when Live of the Bike closed, like there was a minor shots fired of like, what are you doing still running Live of the Bike? So Live of the Bike's a very enclosed environment. It's at most going to be 20, probably even less than 15, because you're dealing with the players, the dealers, and the staff in the back. It's not part of the rest of the casino. And this is not like vindicating Live of the Bike or myself at all, because it's like, yeah, there was a risk, but one of the big deciding factors is that some of the like Sammy and Magic are dealers, and they don't get paid that much, and we wanted to make sure that they got their full paycheck for the week, because we didn't know what was going to happen. And that's something where just like even I stuck around, and I left myself vulnerable. I tried to take as many precautions as possible. I don't think any of us got COVID, but at the same time, like we have to make choices. Like there's no good choice here.
yeah,
And like some people were concerned. They're like, oh, why is it still running? I'm like, well, we made a choice, and part of it too, which like everything was boiled down to, we wanted the staff to get paid as much as possible before the shutdown, work and get paid. And some other minor things were just like, if we shut down prematurely, is there going to be panic? Which is like always, there are just a lot of legitimate concerns, but just like we can't be everything. We have to make sure, we make the best decisions we can with the variables and kind of just like live with it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
What do you think about the places that are opening up right now? Do you have like any thoughts on that? I don't know. It's like a whole. It's difficult, right? Because you talked about how people have jobs, right? They want to get back to, and they want to like they have to go to work, but at the same time, it's like there's like a definite risk. And what do you think about like playing in a casino right now? Like if it was like a full room, not like Live at the Bike,
It sucks because it's like I'm obviously friends with and work with a lot of people, and some people prefer to be voluntarily furloughed, and the others are just like need to get back to work because come July 31st, the extra unemployment money is going to be gone, and I think we're getting a second stimulus check, but just like these guys are literally they won't be able to pay rent and buy food, like and I financially don't have to go on the front lines, but I feel like because of my position, I need to be there in some capacity, not like putting myself at risk, but that's part of being an adult, in which like like when you're younger and you're coming up, you could be like, fuck that, I ain't going out there. But then when you're an adult, somebody's got to do it, And I think I'm at that age and role where I have to be there in some capacity, and do things. So
Yeah, I mean, like there's no good solution, right? Because people
yeah,
still have to make money and have their jobs, and then again, like they could get sick and effectively impact other people, and that's
I
just kind of the price that has to get paid. And
I'm
or
prepared
it's
for several runouts. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, where it's like you can obviously tell people to stay home, this, that, and the other, and then at some point, the amount of money they're getting from staying home itself isn't going to effectively allow them to survive.
And it's
So then,
not putting productivity out there, because like the economy works with like somebody produces something of value, somebody pays for it, so it's just that's where the depressions and spiraling downward comes. If nobody's producing value, nobody's making money, then then the economy's not moving forward.
yeah, and I mean, I just myself have no idea. I don't have the answers. I just sit in my room and play online poker, right? But I guess the things I can do is like help and donate towards things that are helping with that relief and things of that nature. But I don't have the answers, and people talk about this thing forever, right? Because if we had the answer already, that would be put in place.
At a fundamental level, it's just like if the casino doesn't reopen and value isn't produced, then money doesn't move around, and then people are like, oh, the casino is not an essential industry. That is true. It's a luxury good, just like, you know, a Ferrari, or, you know, like
Golfing.
a diamond ring. Yeah, golfing. They're all luxury goods, but they still produce some sort of value. And of course, when money gets thin, they become like elastic goods, lose, you know, their demand and value. It's just basic economics. But if you don't try, it's like guaranteed to fail. So one of the runouts is like bike reopens, poker room opens, live with the bike opens, and I get sick. Now what? You know, like it's obviously
Right.
a PR nightmare for the bike more so than live with the bike, because live with the bike would be just like, look, we tried, and it could have been, it didn't have to be at the bike. I could have got sick like somewhere else, but it's a PR nightmare.
Right. And
It's
that's
just like,
that's where it's where you're from. Like it doesn't matter if it was the bike or if it was a casino by me in Florida. It's
Yeah.
gonna be the same problem. The bike would just be it's like the same thing with the Jungle Man thing. It's like Jungle Man was the one that got caught. This is the problem that you're gonna have. It doesn't matter about like it being the bike or it being a different casino. That's just the reality of the situation.
right.
And
So certain runouts
it's really tough.
we're going to talk about ahead of time and just be like, look, the basic decision is the world needs to get moving and produce value. And this, like, Garrett, you know, mentioned that poker is not a necessary, like, we all know this too. Poker is not like a necessary thing in the world. It's just a luxury good.
Right.
That being said, we've all made our choices to go in this direction, and we have to live with it. And if things happen, one, we need to take the consequences. Two, we need to rethink of our roles in this world, or like what we're supposedly contributing. Like, not necessarily answers like right off the bat. We just have to keep that in mind. Like maybe we all change. I don't know. And that's what these podcasts are for, is to so we could discuss, and like maybe even the audience can chime in non-toxically.
Yeah, non-toxically, right? And it's,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have the answers. We just have the way we see things, right? And
Yeah.
other people, obviously, chat's gonna be like, oh, like these kids have no idea what they're talking about. They don't know anything, and that's
None of us
fine.
know.
Yeah, we don't know
Yeah.
it. No one knows anything. And
Yeah.
if there was a definite solution, the definite solution would be put in place by now.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a bunch of all of this dilemma and debate and arguing, because yeah, you could get people sick, or no one makes money and people still get sick. But then again, everybody gets hurt if the things don't reopen. So it's
Yeah.
like, what do you want me to do? Like, you can't have it all.
Yeah.
And
Like, yeah, somebody, and like people often talk about win-win situations. I'm like, okay, us having a podcast is a win-win situation because we're having a discussion, and you know, hopefully the audience benefits and we get value. But this also hurts some people too. Like any business, like you're taking away from your competitors when people are losing their jobs. It's just like, it's not that linear. Like it could be in a small environment, you could have win-win situations, but if somebody's gaining, a lot of times somebody else is taking hit from your benefit.
yeah, same
So-
thing in poker, right? It's a zero-sum game. Like,
Negative because of the rake.
yeah, everyone can't win. Not everyone can be a winner. And it's the same kind of situation here. It's like, you can't have it all. And it's just
But you
about trying to find out what works.
There are systems that could create like wealth, which is like, you know, in my case, being a house player, you know, I get paid from the house. That increases the amount of money in the community. That being said, hopefully I'm not a losing player and giving that money away. But you know, it's like industries can create wealth off things like the sun is producing energy to the earth, and we're not harnessing everything. So we could create like materials or harness energy other ways. But like, you know, it's just a matter of like, how do you, like, you want wealth you want materials, resources, wealth to come into your environment, and that's how the environment sustains and ideally grows. But you know, so many industries have died. This thing killed many industries. So like that's reality. That's real life. We deal with it. Some people probably, most of us love Steve Jobs for creating the iPhone. Like, but a lot of people are like, you destroyed my industry. You know, fuck you. You know, it's like,
Yeah, right. And there's,
yeah.
it's not easy.
Exactly. That's why, like what you talked about before, Wayne, just getting your skill set as wide as possible and
Yeah.
being able to put yourself in a position where if you can't do one thing, at least your skills are transferable and you can like work in a different direction, which I think is like a really underrated aspect of poker. Like some people have talked about it before, but it's like it really sets you up in a good mindset for thinking about problem solving and like just understanding like upside and what like risks are like worth taking, etc. So I think it's like obviously in this time there's a lot of uncertainty, but I think it's good just keep your skill set as like wide as possible and just try to like play it by ear and see what's going on.
Another thing too is like you're not always going to get along. Like it's you can't always get along with people. So like you and I'm sure you guys are only 21, but and I'm only 42, but like even within groups of friends, there's going to be disagreements. And
Oh,
if in a group of friends, if there's going to be disagreements, imagine strangers or somebody that doesn't even live the same life as you do. And that's just like we have to accommodate for those things when it comes to disagreements, which unfortunately Twitter is so toxic when it comes to like people disagreeing because they don't even want to hear the other side.
Yeah,
Like
it's just it's a polarization attack of if they don't agree with you, they hate you and their point's more right, and they're never going to agree with you. So their point's going to be even more right.
Yeah, they're looking for that confirmation bias where we gravitate towards people who have similar views as our own, and a lot of times it's difficult because it's going to be what's best for us, right? And like what's best for you is not best for another person, and then it's just a tough situation when those things clash and you just devolve into whether it be insulting or like questioning someone's intelligence, etc. Where you just it's just a tough situation, especially when like we aren't all as informed as we think we are in certain subjects. Where like sometimes like we should not be talking about certain things if we don't have a understanding that's going to be beneficial to other people. Where we don't like a lot of times if you don't know like to the extent that an expert does, then it can be better just to sit back
shut
and
the fuck
listen.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the things is like, you know, I have these trophies, but I didn't play perfect. Like, but you know,
Right.
like other people who were watching or can dissect the game, like they're like, oh, do this, this, and that. And this is one of JC Everson, who was the first vanilla StarCraft world champion. He was a co-founder of chess.com. He said this to me, just like most of the guys, if not all the guys, like don't know what the hell they're talking about, whether they're throwing these critiques or else they would be there. You know, so like they have to like some of the smartest people that we see out there, say like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, you know, Bill Gates, you know, Steve Jobs, like Larry Ellison, Sergey Brin, Larry Page. There's like countless people, and like there are people in the background that are just like, oh, they're not that smart, they're overrated. I'm like, it's definitely possible. Some guy in the corner, just like in poker, like some guy in the corner is like smarter than these guys, but these guys also have to create products, and they have to go through a lot of trials and tribulations that we don't have to. Like, and those are challenges that we don't know what's like until we experience them or we have to do them. And there's a lot of just like dilemmas. Like you guys probably didn't know what I had to face, you know, live the bike reopens. But then now that you hear it, do you guys have answers for me? I don't know. Like you know, we I don't have answers, you know. But these are things that I have to face. Like maybe a month later I'm gonna get blasted. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's like part of the risk and other things are necessary, but then again, like no one has the answers, at least not at this point. And then everyone's just kind of playing a guessing game, and everyone thinks they're right.
Yeah, and just like um, part of the fallacy of like why also the formal education was falling apart is because you have this exam or you have this like undergrad and graduate school, like master's and PhD, and it's a finite realm. Like you can actually reach the end. Like if you have a test with 100 questions, you have supposed right answer for all 100 questions. Where in the real world, maybe short term it's yes, long term is no. Maybe short term is no, long term it's yes. Maybe there's no solution period. So that's where just like academia creates an artificial environment where somebody can have the right answers. And that's just not real life. That being said, like, you know, I definitely think having the school as an option is better than not. But this like worship that, you know, our parents' generation had of this. It's like, well, yeah, if we stay in a confined environment, maybe there is 100% right answer. But then now it's not even just the sky's the limit, the future's the limit. Like, we don't know what's
Yeah.
going on.
Mhm. I think when we look back retroactively, it's just a lot easier to say because like the results are there and we just get clouded like what you're talking about with StarCraft when someone's analyzing it, it's like they're not having to do those things in real time. It's like they're not
Yeah.
having to make the decision in the moment. It's like when you look back at a poker hand, it's like, well, why did I do this? Like I could have like obviously check raising would have been better than check calling. Like it's just a lot harder in the moment with a bunch of unknowns, and then there's also pressure on you, and it's like, well, there isn't, like you said, there's not like a clear black and white. There's going to be things that are a benefit to one decision, but it also is not a benefit in the other direction where it's like you have to choose what the trade-off is for you personally, and then also for the people around you. And something as big as what's going on with COVID and like the luxury good that is poker, it's like, well, it's very hard because there's a trade-off to like these people's lives individually with like their jobs, and then let people work also play for a living, and it's like to society in general where it's like, well, we don't want to hurt other people, we don't want to get people sick, and it's
Yeah.
like at what point is the point that we like say, okay, well, the risk, we have to take it and we have to mitigate it as much as we possibly can, but it has to be done at this point or else it's not going to go on and be sustainable at all, like our lives, you know.
You
Well,
guys get
it's
Go
the
ahead.
entire thing, right, between like poker and life and performance stress. Is that we're all operating under stress. It's just about who can manage it effectively and the most effective way. And it's easy to look back at potential pitfalls and downfalls and say, yeah, I made a mistake and how could I be so blind? But then when you really like think about it and look back, it's like you have to forgive yourself for not being able to succeed in the moment sometimes. And that's part of growth is just understanding that you've potentially made a mistake and maybe didn't perform as best as you could have, but that's okay. Like no one, we're fundamentally flawed as humans. We can't make the right decision every time. And having that self-forgiveness is paramount to being able to succeed in the future.
Yeah, I'm scared that this thing's gonna crash. So this was a great one. Let's wrap it up here. And you know, you're gonna have so many groupies after this. So use protection. Yeah, have a good time. And
Yeah.
you guys are Avengers now. I said that one 3-bet panda. Yeah, you guys have any parting words for the audience? Promote your blog and Twitch.
Yeah, sure. Twitter.com/Landon Tice. Find me at Landon Tice on Twitter. My Substack and my blog link is below. It's free, so you don't even have to pay for the blog. And for Twitch, twitch.tv/Landon Tice. I do have, so if subs get access to past VODs, and I've had conversations with Dan Zach, Lucky Chewy, and some streams that I played of 500 Zoom, 200 Zoom, and things of that nature. And yeah, I stream for fun, and that's going to be a thing I'm going to do, and I'm still going to post blogs. And if you want to kind of reach out to me, Twitter is going to be the best way to do that. And yeah.
Yeah, if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, it's twitter.com/x Harbz, Harbz. Not producing any content currently. I did some daily fantasy sports reviews back in the day on my YouTube. It's just Harbz, Harbz. If you want to check those out, they're not, I think, high quality, but other than that,
You're just getting started. Don't worry, you're just getting started. Go ahead. Sorry.
Medium quality.
Medium quality, yeah. Other than that, yeah, Wayne, really appreciate you having me on. It's a blast.
It's fun. It's always fun.
Hopefully we'll see you guys in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and 20 years.
All right, I mean, at least if you want to be, right? Because maybe we'll transition out of poker and find something else to do. But even then, I'll come back to I'll come back to the podcast.
All right, sounds good. All right, take it easy, guys.
All right, guys.